Chapter 803. Li Qingshan said, "That's right." Zhu Yan studied Li Qingshan up and down before suddenly bursting into laughter. "Why are you laughing, fellow?" Li Qingshan raised an eyebrow. "I'm laughing at a brat like you. You're bold enough to refer to me as fellow. You really don't know your place. Those ignorant people call you the king of savages, but do you really think you're a king?" Zhu Yan did not hide his contempt towards Li Qingshan at all. The flames on him roared, and waves of heat surged towards Li Qingshan, ruffling Li Qingshan's clothes. The hierarchy of the cultivation world was strict, more distinct than any social class. The vast heavenly Tao was the sole ruler. It used heavenly tribulation after heavenly tribulation to divide all living beings into different ranks. The difference of one heavenly tribulation was like the difference between heaven and earth. The higher one's cultivation, the greater this difference would be. It was impossible for those above to treat those below as equals. Being able to treat each other politely was already a sign of great self-cultivation, and this was the politeness a king would show to his subjects, the politeness a senior would show to a junior. The Banyan Tree King only referred to Li Qingshan as fellow because he felt it was a fortuitous encounter. Coupled with his relatively gentle nature, this matter left the king of Southern Yu very surprised. The fire-devouring king, Zhu Yan, clearly did not possess such self-cultivation, nor did he believe Li Qingshan had the right to stand on equal footing with him. Li Qingshan laughed aloud too. "Kid, what are you laughing about?" Zhu Yan saw how Li Qingshan could still laugh under the pressure of his aura, so he lost some of his contempt. There was a reason why this kid could cause such a great disturbance in the South in such a short amount of time. If you don't like being called fellow, then forget it. It's just polite anyway. Not just anyone has the right to be my friend. Li Qingshan said. Zhu Yan became furious. He studied Li Qingshan again and pointed at him with the spear of fire. "You sure are bold. Just what are you trying to do by spying on Fire Melt Mountain? If you don't explain yourself, eat my spear." Li Qingshan had basically experienced the temper of fire devourers. Not only were they easily angered, but they were fearless too. His various backgrounds. Even the king of Southern Yu would have to reconsider. The fire-devouring king had threatened to kill him the moment he opened his mouth. Just how arrogant was that? He knew that this time it would be difficult to be kind. Not to mention that he was not willing to bow down. Even if he was willing, it would only make Zhu Yan even more arrogant. He took it as a last resort and said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "I heard that there is a divine wutong tree in your mountain that is very mystical. I would like to borrow it." Zhu Yan was taken aback. "Is there something wrong with your head?" Li Qingshan said, "Is there something wrong with your ears?" Zhu Yan's eyes widened. He was on the verge of erupting in anger, but he began to laugh again. He rested the spear on his shoulder and actually did not lose his temper. He said in a joking manner, "It's not impossible for you to borrow the divine wutong tree, but there's a condition." Li Qingshan was rather surprised too. He asked, "What condition?" "Go to the South Sea and bring me the head of the Merfolk King, and I'll lend you the divine wutong tree." Zhu Yan smiled. Li Qingshan frowned. This bastard was clearly messing with him. He said sternly, "If I had the strength, I might as well just take your head." Zhu Yan's face sharpened. "Since you don't have the strength, then piss off. I'll spare your life for the sake of you making me laugh. You're not allowed to call yourself the king of savages in the future, or if I find out, I'll burn down your savage mountain." He seemed crude, but he actually still had some misgivings about Li Qingshan's identity. However, his misgivings were not the Chan monastery of Devanaga or the unraging monk, but the great Xia Empire. In a place as chaotic as the South, basically no one would care about the identity of a White Hawk commander. Even if he died, the Hawkwolf Guard would not avenge him. However, there was an exception. The great Xia Empire was extremely wary of other folk, in particular the most belligerent of the 7 other folk, the fire-devouring folk. If a White Hawk commander died on Fire Melt Mountain, perhaps the divine hawk might cast its gaze here, leading to unpredictable consequences. Although the great Xia Empire was beginning to decline, Zhu Yan was unwilling to take this risk just to kill an idiot with a screw loose. Fury ignited in Li Qingshan's chest, turning into raging battle intent. His dark eyes stared straight at Zhu Yan, gradually dyed red by the flames. Zhu Yan let out a gentle sound of surprise and squinted his eyes. He actually felt threatened. You really overestimate yourself. If you really want to die, I'll give you what you want. Little and tugged at Li Qingshan's sleeve and shook her head gently. Li Qingshan withdrew his aura, and his expression had already calmed down. He clasped his hands. I've witnessed the might of the fire-devouring kings today, so this trip has been worth it. Since you refuse to lend it to me, sir, I'll be taking my leave first. Without caring about how Zhu Yan responded, he left with a flick of his sleeve. In that split second, he had considered various possibilities, such as luring Zhu Yan into the Azura field and killing him with little n. However, while the Azura field had improved, it was basically impossible for it to trap an expert at this level, and it would be very difficult for them to kill him in a single strike. In reality, the chances of being killed at the third heavenly tribulation were extremely slim, unless there was an overwhelming disparity in strength or an extremely powerful spatial confinement. And across the entire 9 provinces, there were very few existences that could form an overwhelming disparity in strength against Zhu Yan, as well as a space that could imprison him. At the very least, Li Qingshan did not possess either right now. Coupled with the fact that Fire Melt Mountain was right below, where other third heavenly tribulation fire devourers might exist, the chances of killing Zhu Yan were basically zero. Li Qingshan and Little N would have to risk exposing their identities and being killed. As a result, Li Qingshan left without any hesitation. The corner of his lips curled into a smile, silently uttering something that many villains would say, "I'll be back, very soon." After glancing at the divine Wutong tree through the profound light illuminates all, he was already determined to obtain it. He had a firm intuition that the ancient tree where the phoenix resided, or even the entire Fire Melt Mountain, would be crucial for him to practice the phoenix's scripture of Nerva. Zhu Yan's mockery, threats, and humiliation were instead a good thing. It had completely awakened the tiger demon in his heart, rousing his spirits. If the enemy was not despicable, killing them would not be satisfying. Since the fire devourers are already known for their belligerence, I'll give them a war. Zhu Yan gazed at Li Qingshan's back as he traveled off into the distance. He suddenly felt slightly uneasy. This kid already possessed such a cultivation at such a young age, so he could be regarded as a rare prodigy among humans. If he was given time, he might actually be able to undergo the third heavenly tribulation. And the woman beside him was very extraordinary too. If they really did undergo the tribulation successfully one day, wouldn't that mean, the more he thought about it, the more uneasy he became? After reaching the third heavenly tribulation, even if he did not practice divination, he would still possess a profound sense of fate, which allowed cultivators to make the correct choice. Zhu Yan's eyes erupted with flames, and he suddenly tightened his grip on the spear in his hand. Chapter 804. Hold on. A sense of danger suddenly surged through Li Qingshan's heart. A call rang out from behind him, and there was a flash of fire before him. Zhu Yan blocked his path with his spear. Flames surged around him as his aura surged. What else do you want, sir? Li Qingshan raised an eyebrow and glanced at Little and had always been expressionless in front of others, but Li Qingshan could tell that she clearly understood what was going on. He thought, this girl, I've changed my mind. I'm willing to lend the divine Wutong tree to you for cultivation. Zhu Yan pointed his spear at Fire Melt Mountain, basically carving the words, ill intentions, into his face. Oh, don't you need me to exchange for it with the head of the Merfolk King? I've already prepared to go to the South Sea. Li Qingshan laid out his hands with a smile. Ha, with just you? I can understand that you can't afford it, so I'll show some mercy and lend it to you. Kid, why don't you hurry up and thank me on your knees? Zhu Yan's eyes were filled with mockery, like a cat toying with a mouse, and a mouse that was extremely arrogant and had no idea what was going on. However, Li Qingshan's calm and fearless attitude made him raise his guard slightly. How can I lend the treasures of the fire devourers to an outsider? I've misspoken. I'll never mention the word borrow again. Li Qingshan glanced back at Fire Melt Mountain. The divine Wutong tree stood in the center of Fire Melt Mountain. Once the formations were activated, even demon kings would struggle to escape death. Even if Zhu Yan had been willing to lend it to him sincerely in the beginning, how could he use it without worry? Not to mention that he was clearly filled with hostility right now. Since he could not borrow it, then he would take it by force. Wondrous treasures of the world belonged to the strong. All he could do was fight. What? You said you wanted to lend it to me earlier, but you're not lending it to me now? Are you toying with me? Today, you'll have to lend it to me even if you don't want to. Seeing that Li Qingshan wasn't fooled at all, Zhu Yan's face turned grim. Sparks flew out of his mouth and danced around Li Qingshan. Didn't your mother teach you not to spit when talking to others? Li Qingshan waved his hand impatiently. He laughed and said, besides, if I, your old man, want to leave, I'll leave. How can you stop me? Li Qingshan took out a violet talisman with a flip of his hand. Before he came to Fire Melt Mountain, he originally planned on seeing the divine Wutong tree in person. It would be great if it really was true. Then he would negotiate a deal with the fire-devouring king. He borrowed the right to use the divine Wutong tree, conquering all over the southern border. He had also accumulated a large amount of spoils of war, and this purple talisman was one of his spoils of war in the southern border. He never expected the fire-devouring king to cut him off as soon as he opened his mouth before going all out with his mockery. There was no room for negotiation at all, and now they were prepared to make a move. However, it was not like he was unprepared, or in other words, under little and special reminder. Of course, while violet talismans were powerful and rare, they could not pose any threat to Zhu Yan. However, this violet talisman was not for battle. A great shifting talisman. You want to leave? Zhu Yan recognized the talisman with a single glance. With a snap of his fingers, the specks of sparks suddenly erupted, expanding by thousands of times. The power they unleashed was enough to split open mountains and split open the ground. Li Qingshan turned around and pulled Little N into his arms. With a great rumble, the surging flames completely swallowed them. From the ground, they seemed like flowers that had suddenly bloomed in the sky. The spear in Zhu Yan's hand turned into a scarlet streak of light, stabbing towards Li Qingshan with lightning speed. He did not give Li Qingshan the opportunity to activate the violet talisman at all. The lofty demon suppression tower fell down, enveloping Li Qingshan and Little N. The tip of the spear collided with the tower, emitting a sharp clang. Zhu Yan was slightly surprised. Although he had not used his full strength in that attack, he did not expect the demon suppression tower to be so tough. In that instant, thousands of sparks burst forth from the tip of the spear, as if thousands of explosions had occurred. The demon suppression tower only lasted for an instant before shattering. However, by the time the flames dissipated, Li Qingshan and Little N had already disappeared. And here I was thinking that you had something to rely on to speak so arrogantly before me. It's just a great shifting talisman. I'll find you and skin you alive. Zhu Yan snorted coldly and 2 streams of flames spewed out of his nostrils. Then he looked around and closed his eyes to sense. The great shifting talisman could not be compared to the purple escape talisman, which could allow one to travel 5,000 kilometers. It could only move 500 kilometers at most. Coupled with the fact that he was moving 2 people at the same time, they would not be more than 250 kilometers away. They would not be able to escape his pursuit at this distance. However, after a while, he opened his eyes and frowned. How can they hide their auras so thoroughly? It's as if they don't exist. Without any hesitation, he chose a direction based on his intuition and turned into a meteor as he gave chase. However, he flew back a while later. Clearly, he had not succeeded. Zhu Yan wanted to attack Savage Mountain, but he gave up on the idea after some thought. Humans and demons could do something like that, but there were too many taboos for other folk, so they could not act recklessly. They've taken a blow from me, so they're probably heavily injured as well. Their cultivations are greatly affected. The 3rd heavenly tribulation is like a natural chasm that separates countless geniuses. Even if this kid succeeds one day, it'll be 100 years at the very least. Why would I be afraid of him? On the other hand, the merfolk of the South Sea have been rather restless recently. They're preparing for the next expedition. In the misty forest, Li Qingshan and Shaoan walked side by side next to a small river. They were surrounded by giant trees that looked like skyscrapers. The leaves were like clouds, and the roots were like dragons and snakes. The mist was as thick as milk. As they moved forward, it slowly dissipated, giving off an ethereal aura. However, if a mortal was here, they would be reduced to a pile of bones in an instant. The roars of demons rose and fell, and the shadows lingered in the thick mist. Li Qingshan could hide his aura to the point where not even a drop of water could be seen, like a spirit turtle in the depths of the sea. Little Anne's path of white bone and great beauty was renowned for the path of life, death, and space. It was just a set of white bones, so how could he sense it? If regular second heavenly tribulation cultivators were to receive the fire-devouring king's spark explosion, they would be heavily injured. However, Li Qingshan practiced the phoenix's scripture of Nerva, so his tolerance for fire was very great. He was basically unscathed. However, he dared not underestimate the fire-devouring king because of this. The strike was only a probe at most. It was not even a formal attack. If it really were a battle to the death, it would be impossible for the phoenix to ignore the fire-devouring king's flames if it had not reached the fourth layer. Not to mention, the skill in battle and his tough body demonstrated by the spear made him hold a very high opinion of Zhu Yan. No wonder he's so arrogant. If I were to fight him alone, I probably wouldn't be his opponent. Fortunately, you reminded me to prepare a great shifting talisman, or it really would be a little troublesome. I need to find a way to collect a few more in the future. It's a pity that I don't have an innate ability like MOU, or I can go wherever I want in the world. Li Qingshan said to Little N with some pity. He had even tried to learn the hiding through space from the Azura I Ching, but even in the Azura realm, there were not a lot of people who knew this move. Not only did it require talent for controlling space, but it also took up a tremendous amount of time and effort, so he could only give up on it. Not now, but who knows, maybe in the future? Little N smiled. Her hair that reached the ground was like seaweed floating in the seawater, dragging behind her. Hopefully. The fire devourers really do live up to their reputation for being bad-tempered. I definitely can't just let the matter go with him this time. I wonder if that bastard will go to Savage Mountain? Other folk have always been xenophobic. They hate humans in particular, and you're a White Hawk commander too. The Great Xia Empire has issued orders to hunt down the fire devourers several times in the past, and it was the Hawkwolf Guard who dug out their hearts for merit. However, I do hope he goes to Savage Mountain, said Little Anne. Oh, but as long as we sacrifice 10 cave masters, there should be people who can help us deal with the problems of Fire Melt Mountain, said Little Anne. A king of other folk had attacked a blessed land and massacred human cultivators, and they were all second heavenly tribulation cultivators too. Was he planning on rebuilding his divine kingdom and washing away his old grievances? How could the Great Xia Empire tolerate him? Li Qingshan was mildly taken aback before smiling. Everything is going according to your plan. He never thought the Blood Oath Scroll would actually have a use like this. Actually, there's no need for 10 people. We only need to send the Marquis of Serene Sea to his death. Fair enough, but he probably won't go. He doesn't take us seriously either. As soon as Little Anne turned around, Li Qingshan pinched her delicate nose and smiled. You knew the fire-devouring king would be like this a long time ago, didn't you? You even told me to negotiate with him, which made me lose so much fun. I even wasted a talisman. Nothing is absolute. Perhaps he really will offer us something we can accept, and it won't be the Merfolk King's head. Moreover, we have to personally confirm the divine Wutong tree before we can decide whether it's worth the effort or not. Little Anne pouted and said with a nasal voice, It's worth it. It's very worth it. We're basically determined to get it. Tell me, what other brilliant plans do you have? Li Qingshan rubbed her head. Haven't you already thought of it? Little Anne said. That's right. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. If we want to take down Fire Melt Mountain, we need to borrow the strength of the merfolk of the South Sea. That little head of yours sure is thinking too much. Li Qingshan nodded. If they had all undergone the third heavenly tribulation, flattening Fire Melt Mountain would not be difficult. However, they did not have that strength right now, so they needed to borrow their strength. If they did not have the Blood Oath Scroll and went to the South Sea and told the Merfolk King, "We're willing to lend you a hand and destroy Fire Melt Mountain," it'll probably be boring again. However, if the two of them were coupled with the 10 cave masters who had sworn a blood oath and 12-second heavenly tribulation cultivators, it would be enough to become an important counterweight to the balance between the two races. They might even be able to drag the South Sea Sword Pavilion down with them. However, even though they had made so many preparations, how to borrow their strength was still a problem. They would definitely be wary of him, and he could end up as a sacrifice with the slightest carelessness. The key is how to move the Merfolk King. Merfolk don't have such a bad temper, but they're exactly the same when it comes to xenophobia. Merfolk hide in the South Sea, and the Hawkwolf Guard has far less information than the Fire Devourers, so it's really difficult to make a decision. If that stone fishwoman still doesn't help out, I'll eat her, Littleton said. Stone fishwoman? Li Qingshan was taken aback. He smiled. You're talking about Ru Xian. Don't worry, she'll definitely help me. At this moment, Li Qingshan's expression changed. He exchanged glances with Little Anne. Someone is attacking Savage Mountain. Floating Heaven said. No bullet window. Chapter 805. Above the azure sky, among the white clouds. The myriad poison ancestor sat on a jade throne and stroked his long beard gently as he stared at Savage Mountain below with his green eyes. Banners fluttered in the surroundings as disciples of all ages and genders gathered around. They were all dressed in the same way, either in green robes or dresses. Even the weakest among them was at the first heavenly tribulation or above. There were almost 100 of them, demonstrating the heritage of a large sect. Master, Li Qingshan and Li Qingshan aren't on Savage Mountain right now. There's no one presiding over the protective formation, so it's a perfect opportunity to attack the mountain. However, Qian Liangmu flew back from Savage Mountain on a green cloud and reported politely, but he hesitated again. However what? The myriad poison ancestor stopped stroking his beard. However, I can tell that Li Qingshan has no intention of founding a sect in the south. He'll return to the Green Province sooner or later, so why must we attack Savage Mountain? Qian Liangmu asked. The mighty poisonous young master actually has such a gentle side. Probably no one in the south will believe us if we tell them. A beautiful woman smiled. A large, colorful spider sat on her shoulder. Its 8 compound eyes stared at Qian Liangmu, shining with an extremely human-like viciousness. Don't tell me he's been frightened out of his wits after seeing Li Qingshan? A middle-aged man as thin as a bamboo continued. He stood on the head of a poisonous centipede that was several meters long. The two of them stood on the left and right of the 10,000 poison cult leaders' green jade throne, showing their different identities. They were Qian Liangmu's junior sister and senior brother, people who were qualified to compete with Qian Liangmu for the position of the 10,000 poison cult leader. Demonic sects had never been one to care about relationships, so their relationship was obviously like fire and water. They would never let an opportunity to strike at each other slip by. Qian Liangmu sneered and completely ignored them. He bowed. Please reconsider, Master. Qian Liangmu did not agree with attacking Savage Mountain. He was not a kind person. He would never let an opportunity to kill and rob slip by. However, when the Banyan Tree King referred to him as fellow, he became rather hesitant. Coupled with their meeting a few days ago, he just felt like Li Qingshan was not as simple as he seemed. Do you think I can't deal with him? The myriad poison ancestor said in displeasure. This disciple wouldn't dare. Qian Liangmu said, How can I allow someone to sleep beside my bed? Since he is unwilling to lower himself and become my 10,000 poison cult's protector, I will make sure that he has no place to stand in the southern border. You can leave now. Green light flashed through the myriad poison ancestor's eyes. He exuded an unparalleled and powerful aura, and all the disciples lowered their heads. The southern border had always been dominated by him, and he would never allow other forces to develop. If one day, Li Qingshan really left the Qingzhou, he would not be able to do anything. If he became an honored guest of the king of Southern Yu's estate, He and the woman named Little and would definitely become a great problem with their talent. Wouldn't they become a laughingstock of the world? As for some of Qian Liangmu's concerns, it wasn't that he hadn't considered it. However, with the difference in their cultivation levels, it wasn't worth it at all. The king of Southern Yu did not take action. He had only accepted the Banyan Tree King's advice out of consideration for the situation of the two prefectures. Could it be that he was really afraid of Li Qingshan? This brat is arrogant and rude, refusing the goodwill of the 10,000 poison cult. God damn it. And he's only at the second heavenly tribulation, yet he's bold enough to call himself the king of savages or whatever. Master wants to teach a false king like him a lesson today so that he understands the difference between him and a true king, said the gorgeous woman with the spider. Junior brother, if you're afraid, feel free to return to the Mist Capital. I'm willing to lend my meager strength to assist Master in destroying Savage Mountain. Capture Li Qingshan alive. The centipede man said and shot a glance at the surroundings. Apart from a few elders who were proud of their statuses, the regular disciples all called out with him. Destroy Savage Mountain. Capture Li Qingshan alive. For a moment, the banners swayed, and the battle cries shook the sky. The myriad poison ancestor slammed the armrest of his throne and stood up. With a wave of his right hand, the chilly winds and green flames swirled and gathered, condensing into a dark green sphere. Lightning crisscrossed and flowed, and the light dyed everyone's faces green. The lightning pearl of myriad poison was a secret technique of the myriad poison cult. It possessed the toughness of lightning and the gentleness of poison, making it extremely destructive. In that moment, even the sun seemed to dim. Everyone's gazes were drawn to the lightning pearl of myriad poison. Green light flowed through the myriad poison ancestor's eyes, and he extended one hand to both hands. The lightning pearl of myriad poison spun and grew larger and larger, shining brighter and brighter. In the blink of an eye, it reached the size of a water tank and was pushed down violently, immediately striking Savage Mountain. Rumbling filled the heavens and the earth, causing the earth to tremble slightly. Lightning shot out and dyed the sky green. Then it turned into a poisonous cloud, enveloping an area of several thousand kilometers. It surged through Savage Mountain and produced an ear-piercing sound of corrosion. The disciples of the myriad poison cult all cheered. Mighty ancestor, you've scared Li Qingshan so much that he pissed his pants, too afraid to leave the sect. I've practiced the lightning pearl of myriad poison for all these years, but I never thought this move would actually possess such power. Now that I've seen the ancestor take action today, I finally understand why our myriad poison cult can dominate the south. Li Qingshan is like an ant trying to shake a tree. How laughable! Savage Mountain has already fallen, so I'll serve as the vanguard for the ancestor right now and capture Li Qingshan. The myriad poison ancestor stood with his hands behind his back rather proudly. The corner of his lips curled into a complacent smile, but his smile suddenly stiffened. He barked coldly, "All of you shut up." Everyone fell silent out of fear. They had no idea why the myriad poison ancestor had flown into a rage. Only when they looked over did they see that beneath the poisonous cloud, Savage Mountain remained shrouded in mist and clouds. The protective formation was unscathed. Their flattery was no different from mockery. Qian Liangmu thought, sure enough, it's not that simple. Senior brother, didn't you say the formation on Savage Mountain is unmanned? The spider woman questioned. Li Qingshan and the others really aren't on the mountain. I never thought they'd be bold enough to pass the control of the formation to someone else. On Savage Mountain, the Banyan Tree King sighed inside. This kid sure knows how to make trouble for me. He used his roots to extract the dense spiritual chi of Savage Mountain before scattering it into the air through the branches and leaves, activating the various formations. He had already become the eye of the formation, using the geographical advantage of Savage Mountain and his extremely abundant knowledge and experience to unleash the extraordinary power of the formations. All of you shut up. None of you need to do anything. Just watch properly. The myriad poison ancestor bellowed out furiously and left the jade throne, flying towards Savage Mountain. He swung his hand and struck out again and again. Lightning pearls of poison bombarded Savage Mountain one after another. The booms rang out constantly, like a thunderstorm. In the valley, the night roamers gazed at the sky in fright. Within the surging poisonous mist, bolts of green lightning danced about like dragons and snakes, constantly battering against the formations. Any single bolt of lightning would be a disaster for them. Myriad Poison Ancestor. He really is a great cultivator after all. What he's capable of is not something we can match up to. Yu Wufeng stood on the top of the mountain. His white hair drifted in the wind as he was stern. Boss Yu, now's not the time to praise others. If the Myriad Poison Ancestor kills his way in, we'll all be doomed. The gentleman of heavenly blubber also arrived at the top of the mountain to watch. His fat jiggled as a sliver of fear filled his face. An opponent like that was not something he could contend with at all. Even when he hid in the formation, he struggled to feel safe at all. Fellow cultivators, please block the attack. Yi Liusu flew over. The blood oath doesn't require us to throw our lives at the Myriad Poison cult. I think the Banyan Tree King is in charge of the formation. There's no need for us to do anything. Yu Wufeng snorted coldly inside. If it's Li Qingshan, then so be it, but an other folk who has just undergone the tribulation dares to order me around? Yi Liusu frowned. Then she looked at the other cave masters. None of them had any intentions of doing anything either, smiling at her. Heh, the blood oath doesn't have a clause like that. However, once our king returns and gives the order, we'll still have to throw our lives at him. The best outcome is just the Myriad Poison Ancestor taking the blood oath scroll away. I don't care anyway. It doesn't matter who I become a dog. At worst, I'll just follow the ancestor to attack the South Sea Sword Pavilion. The gentleman of heavenly blubber smiled. Yu Wufeng's face changed. With the blood oath scroll in Li Qingshan's hands, there was still a chance for him to regain his freedom. If he ended up in the Myriad Poison Ancestor's hands, he would truly be in a state of utter misery. He would not be able to die, and it would be detrimental to the South Sea Sword Pavilion. With a clang, the fogbow sword was drawn from its sheath. It went from 1 to 10, then from 10 to 100, conjuring streaks of white light that pierced the depths of the poisonous cloud. Although they were all eaten away in the blink of an eye, they depleted the poisonous cloud and nullified the attacks from the lightning bead of myriad poison. Puppy you of the South Sea Sword Pavilion, I've destroyed the formation. I'll cut off your dog head first as a sacrifice to the flag. The Myriad Poison Ancestor could not see the situation on Savage Mountain, but he recognized the sword style and fogbow sword chi of the South Sea Sword Pavilion. Originally, he had dragged all his disciples out so that they could show off their might, but he never expected the formation of Savage Mountain to actually be so tough. The way it operated was extremely ingenious, without the slightest opening. He could not help but fly into a rage out of humiliation. Old dog Myriad Poison, get through this formation first. Yu Wufeng said. At this moment, the gentleman of heavenly blubber moved too. He sucked in a deep breath, and fierce wind surged into it. His mountainous body swelled up, becoming like a huge ball of flesh. He swelled to the limit and suddenly opened his mouth, spitting out a streak of sticky, scorching blood-red light. It rushed into the air and actually pierced the poisonous cloud, creating a huge hole. His mountainous body shrank as he gasped for air. Yu Wufeng glanced at him in surprise. He never expected him to actually go all out. The gentleman of heavenly blubber smiled. Since I can't avoid being a dog, I have to find a good family. Although Li Qingshan and Little N were in possession of the Blood Oath Scroll, they did not oppress them too much. Even when they attacked various parts of the south, they possessed an absolute advantage. Not only was there no danger, but they even shared some of the benefits. Li Qingshan had no intention of founding a sect or establishing some sort of organization in the south, but the gentleman of heavenly blubber was intrigued. He proactively advised Li Qingshan on one hand, and he also established connections with the various cave masters on the other. He wanted to establish Savage Mountain into a true sect. He ranked second among the 10 cave masters, while Yu Wufeng stood aloof and aloof. He only wanted to return to the South Sea Sword Pavilion. Although the night roamers were favored and trusted by Li Qingshan, There was a natural barrier between them and the cave masters. They basically never interfered with one another. No matter how he thought about it, his position actually felt a little like a caretaker. If he really could establish Savage Mountain into an organization of its own, then he would be a figure with actual authority to help the King of Savages govern Savage Mountain. And, after a period of contact, he discovered that Li Qingshan was not a dishonest demonic cultivator. Since he had said there was a chance to remove the blood oath, he was not joking around. By then, not only would he regain his freedom, but there was even a chance for him, the caretaker, to become the second king of savages. Then, he said, "Our king is about to return, yet you still haven't taken action? Are you waiting for our king to give a personal order?" As a result, another 3 cave masters who were relatively close to him took action. Why would the remaining people be bold enough to be a role model? Whether they were willing or not, all they could do was take action. Chapter 806. Qian Liangmu went up to assist without another word. With a wave of his hand, he unleashed a lightning bead of myriad poison. It collided with the streak of light and nullified each other. "Didn't I say you could watch?" The myriad poison ancestor looked over with his green eyes and said in displeasure, "I've watched Master demonstrate the supreme skills of the cult, so I've been itching to make a fool of myself. Please guide me, Master. Once we return to the cult, I'm willing to accept punishment." Qian Liangmu said politely. Praise filled the leader of the myriad poison cult's eyes. With a wave of his hand, he said, "So be it. I'll let you mess around this time." Before he had even finished speaking, the people of the myriad poison cult called out, "Please guide me, Master. We're willing to accept punishment." They swarmed over together, either using arcane artifacts or techniques, all bombarding Savage Mountain. For a moment, light filled the surroundings. With the combined strength of an entire sect, the pressure on the protective formation immediately increased drastically. "Senior Tree King, may I ask how much longer you can last?" Yi Liusu was worried, asking the Banyan Tree King for guidance. "Not too long. If nothing goes wrong, a year or so should be no problem." The Banyan Tree King swayed his branches and said in an ancient voice, "But with your assistance right now, it can last a little longer." "Huh?" Yi Liusu was taken aback. She never expected the Banyan Tree King's "not too long" to be so long. It was impossible for the myriad poison cult to spend a year or so on Savage Mountain. It would already be impressive if they could last a few days. And the Banyan Tree King had clearly made a conservative estimate. In other words, it was impossible for the myriad poison cult to breach Savage Mountain. When the cave masters heard that, they could not help but work even harder. Fortunately, they did not turn down the offer just now, or they would definitely be punished once Li Qingshan returned. They sighed in amazement inside. The Banyan Tree King really does live up to his reputation. With him presiding over the formation, probably only the King of Southern Yu can breach Savage Mountain with a group of people. You guessed right. It really is the 10,000 poison cult. That old poisonous thing really can't tolerate me. Li Qingshan stood on the cloud and gazed at Savage Mountain, which was shrouded in poisonous mist. Seeing how it was not the King of Southern Yu, he still let out a sigh of relief. With the Banyan Tree King presiding over the protective formation, it definitely could not be taken down by a single myriad poison ancestor. "What should we do?" Little Lin asked. "We obviously won't lose if we work together. Killing this group of disciples isn't a problem, but it'll be very difficult for us to keep the myriad poison ancestor here. Right now is not the time for us to openly clash with him, but it's impolite not to reciprocate. Let's go to the headquarters of the myriad poison cult." Li Qingshan took Little and flew away. The myriad poison ancestor suddenly felt uneasy. He looked at the horizon, but all he saw were white clouds. No matter how he thought about it, he did not feel like there was anything that could threaten him, so he made up his mind and continued his assault on Savage Mountain. "Yin Qing, come out." Yin Qing was currently cultivating in the Azura field when Li Qingshan's voice suddenly rang out by her ear. She had already been moved outside the Azura field. "I have a mission for you. I wonder if your arts of escaping through space can pass through the formation below." Yin Qing followed Li Qingshan's finger and looked in the direction that Li Qingshan was pointing at. All she saw was a huge basin below. Within the pale green miasma sat a series of majestic buildings that rose and fell. They were all dyed dark green and gave off a sinister aura. Sure. Yin Qing studied it for a while and nodded in response. As an Azura from the Azura realm, she possessed arts of escaping through space that regular Azura could not grasp. The formations of the myriad poison cult were powerful, but they could not stop her from infiltrating them. Then can you destroy the formations from the inside? Li Qingshan took a step further and asked. No, Yin Qing said. Little and said, regular formations are relatively easier to destroy from the inside, but the formations of the myriad poison cult restrict both the inside and the outside. If you try to forcefully destroy them, you'll definitely die from the backlash. That's fine. As long as you can get in, that's enough. Li Qingshan said. Who's my target? Yin Qing asked. Everyone. Li Qingshan then corrected himself. Not just the people but the items too. Anyway, you have to destroy them as much as possible. All of the spoils will go to you. Yes, sir. Yin Qing accepted the order and took a step, vanishing. She appeared over 5 kilometers away and arrived in the northwestern corner of the myriad poison cult with a few flashes. Afterwards, she used her arts of escaping through space and infiltrated there silently. Little and said, if that's the case, I'll have to fight the myriad poison cult to the death. Li Qingshan said, he can't get through my shield, but I have a spear that can pierce his shield. I obviously have to make good use of it. Little and nodded. In terms of assassination techniques, Yin Qing surpasses the night roamers. Apart from the myriad poison ancestor himself, there aren't a lot of people in the myriad poison cult who can survive her assassination. The Azura realm is a higher world after all, one of the 6 realms of Sasra. In terms of experience in battle and slaughter, even I'm nowhere close to her. If I can gain a few more Azura commanders as subordinates, I'll definitely be much more powerful than those cave lords. I wonder if I can use the Azura field to summon the Azura king one day. Li Qingshan glanced at the Azura field in his hand before casting his gaze at the myriad poison cult below. It'll be up to her performance next. The myriad poison ancestor had led all the elders and disciples of the cult out, but the cult was still very lively. Most of them were outer disciples who had yet to undergo the first heavenly tribulation, and a few protectors remained in the cult. Kong Ming happened to be one of them. Today, it was his turn to pass on the path of cultivation to the outer disciples. He sat under the dripping eaves, facing a square made of limestone. Several hundred disciples stood sternly, listening attentively. There was a gentle breeze, and the bronze bells on the eaves jingled. The sunlight shone down, covering the stone beasts on the eaves with a halo. He was rather fed up with this job. He wasted his precious time on these pieces of trash. In another 3 years, not even a third of them would still be standing here, and after going through the various selections, there might not even be a single person who could reach his position in the end. However, he could not ignore the rules of the cult, so he spoke patiently as his eyes darted around among the disciples. In this generation, there were a few disciples who were rather good-looking. He could play around with them when he had the time. The warm wind blew, the sun shone brightly, and he was in the absolute safety of the sect, so he seemed extremely relaxed. He even felt a little tipsy. When a coldness suddenly filled his heart, he was slightly taken aback. He lowered his head, only to see a circular blade around his neck, glistening under the sunlight. The myriad poison ancestor had been attacking Savage Mountain for so long, so he gradually became anxious. He also found it rather strange. With his cultivation and mental fortitude, even if he could not take down Savage Mountain, he should not be behaving like this. Had he failed to account for something? And it had already been so long, so why hadn't Li Qingshan returned yet? He believed that as long as Li Qingshan appeared, he definitely would not be able to escape his senses. Then he would be able to capture the leader. Even if he could not take down Savage Mountain, it would not matter. Right as he thought about it, his heart skipped a beat. Oh no. Disciples of the myriad poison cult would all be implanted with the poison heart goo the moment they became inner disciples. It could drastically increase their cultivation speed and make it easier to control goo insects. At the same time, it was also a method of control, preventing them from betraying the cult. Once they were killed, they would sense it too. Chapter 807. Master, what's wrong? Qian Liangmu used techniques again and again to support the myriad poison ancestor. Suddenly, he saw the myriad poison ancestor's expression change drastically, so he could not help but ask. Return to the myriad poison cult. The myriad poison ancestor had no time to explain. He turned into a streak of green light and flew back to the myriad poison cult. The other disciples, elders, and so on were all clueless. They all flew back with the myriad poison ancestor. The surroundings of Savage Mountain below had been corroded by the poisonous cloud and bombarded by techniques, reduced to a wasteland. However, Savage Mountain was completely unscathed. The cloud and mist surged without dispersing. Seeing the people of the myriad poison cult suddenly retreat, the night roamers and the 10 cave masters were all confused. They were all surprised. Yiliosu asked the Banyan Tree King for guidance again. Senior, the myriad poison cult has suddenly retreated. Is there some scheme behind it? The Banyan Tree King understood everything. He smiled. Your king must have come up with some scheme to lure them away. Yiliosu stopped worrying. Even if the myriad poison cult had any schemes, they would be completely exposed before the Banyan Tree King, who was renowned for his wisdom. Li Qingshan had pulled him over to watch over Savage Mountain, so it was as safe as it could be. The myriad poison ancestor flew quickly. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat. Another 2 inner sect disciples had died, and they had been in the myriad poison cult. His face could not help but change drastically, and he sped up again. Just what has happened? The formations haven't been triggered. Has there been internal strife in the cult? He could not be blamed for having doubts like that. Without destroying the formations, even the king of Southern Yu and the Banyan Tree King could not massacre the descendants of the cult. Speaking of which, probably only the Shadow Queen of the Night Roamers possessed such a wondrous ability. However, the Shadow Palace's sphere of influence did not extend beyond the south. Apart from Ghost Shadow, he had never heard of any Night Roamers operating there. The Shadow Queen would never take action so easily, let alone oppose a large sect like the Myriad Poison cult. The Myriad Poison ancestor returned to the basin in a hurry. He passed through the green miasma and landed in the Myriad Poison cult. Immediately, the heavy smell of blood filled his nostrils. Corpses littered the ground and fresh blood flowed, dyeing the limestone square red. The corpses were all headless, and in the middle of the plaza, there was a pyramid made of several hundred heads piled up. They were all disciples of the 10,000 Poison cult, and the one at the very top was Protector Wei Ming. Under the red light of the setting sun, he died with everlasting regret, his expression sinister and mournful. Behind the pyramid of human heads, on the blue shadow wall, 5 words were written in blood, Savage King respectfully. The bloody words had yet to dry as they flowed down. The Myriad Poison ancestor's face reddened before going from red to green, a wretched green. His eyes shone with venomous light as he squeezed out 3 words from between his teeth. Li Qingshan. He waved his palm fiercely, and the pyramid of human heads along with the screen wall were all turned into powder. His chest heaved up and down. Before he could calm down, he suddenly said, "Not good." Qian Liangmu, his 2 senior brothers, junior sister, 3 direct disciples, 5 elders, and 3 protectors hurried back to the Myriad Poison cult with several dozen inner sect disciples. They were obviously much slower than the Myriad Poison ancestor. When the Myriad Poison ancestor hurried back to the Myriad Poison cult, they had not even completed a 10th of the journey. Qian Liangmu and the others were all worried. They had no idea what had happened in the cult, but they were afraid of abandoning the regular disciples. If the 10 cave masters of Savage Mountain caught up to them, they would basically be cutting off the foundation of the cult. Of course, they were just overthinking. Just the name of the Myriad Poison ancestor was enough to deter any cave masters from taking this risk. Although they had not come across any actual danger in this battle, they were all exhausted. They all sat down to meditate and recover. A while later, only Yu Wufeng stood up. He held the fogbow sword and gazed in the direction the myriad poison cult had retreated in. He seemed to be in thought. My king must have lured the myriad poison ancestor away. Regular disciples can't fly fast, so they'll definitely fall behind. And without the geographical advantage, they won't be able to recover much of their strength through pills alone. Why don't you catch up and take a look, brother you? The gentleman of heavenly blubber said with a smile. He had lost quite a lot of his fat again, turning into a fatty that weighed 250 kilograms. Fatty, you sure are cunning. Are you trying to send me to my death? Yu Wufeng said coldly. Even without the myriad poison ancestor, how was he supposed to contend against Qian Liangmu and the others all by himself? Once he was kept busy, once the myriad poison ancestor and the others returned, he really would have no idea how he died. Not exactly. It's not like I know how to ride the sword, so it's not easy for me to come and go. If you can kill a few people from the myriad poison cult, you'll be doing a great service for Savage Mountain. With my king's clear distinction between kindness and grievances, perhaps he'll return your freedom? The gentleman of heavenly blubber chuckled. He was eager for Yu Wufeng to run into the myriad poison ancestor and die outside. That way, he would be the rightful first cave master of Savage Mountain. Li Qingshan would be the king of savages, while he would be the crown prince. However, that was not a lie. Yu Wufeng was not an idiot, so why would he fall for it? Sure enough, Yu Wufeng gazed at the gentleman of heavenly blubber deeply and became tempted. With his strength, as long as he did not run into the myriad poison ancestor directly, he would not be in too much danger. Let's work together. A black figure appeared. Ghost Shadow was rather confident in his techniques of stealth. He was confident that as long as he did not clash with the myriad poison ancestor, he would be able to protect himself. He had been tempted by what the gentleman of heavenly blubber had said, so he wanted to see whether there was any merit he could earn. All right. Yu Wufeng made up his mind. He slapped the fogbow sword and stood up with it in hand. He fused with the sword and turned into a streak of white light, flying off. Let's go too, Yi Liusu said before merging into the darkness with Yi Liuxing and Yi Liubo, tailing after him. The myriad poison ancestor rode a great green cloud together, currently flying towards the myriad poison cult. A streak of light pursued them from behind, but they were still over 5 kilometers away. Yu Wufeng's eyes narrowed, and he brought his fingers together like a sword, gently brushing past the fogbow sword. Sword chi flowed in the surroundings, and his white hair drifted about. Suddenly he stabbed out. An extremely resplendent streak of white light shot towards the green cloud. He only hoped to keep the people of the myriad poison cult here for a moment so that Ghost Shadow could find an opportunity to strike. If he could kill a few disciples of the myriad poison cult, that would obviously be for the best. The streak of light shot into the green cloud. The green cloud that seemed extremely soft surged and actually devoured and digested the streak of light with ease. Yu Wufeng came to a halt and frowned. The myriad poison cult really did have some tricks up their sleeves. They did not just gather together randomly. Instead, they merged their powers together, vaguely forming some sort of formation. Even Ghost Shadow probably would not be bold enough to venture deep and carry out an assassination. Qian Liangmu flew out of the green cloud and smiled. Have you come to see me off, Cave Master Yu? That's right. I've long heard of the poisonous young master's great name. You stand alongside my junior brother, Peng Jingni, as a hero. Are you bold enough to face me in battle today? Yu Wufeng stood with his sword. He had noticed the myriad poison ancestor was not around a long time ago, so he spoke with composure. However, he also considered whether to advance or retreat inside. He probably could not take advantage of the situation this time. However, leaving was only a matter of a word. The fogbow sword moved extremely quickly, so these people definitely could not catch up to him. Qian Liangmu said, Cave Master Yu's courage is admirable. You're even more suited to be the next pavilion master of the South Sea Sword Pavilion than your junior brother. It's just a pity that you're bound by a blood oath, which is quite a pity. Junior brother, are you going to collude with the enemy in front of so many disciples? Don't waste your breath on him. Go kill this puppy from the South Sea Sword Pavilion. The centipede man said impatiently. Qian Liangmu originally wanted to mock Yu Wufeng a little, hoping that he would charge over forcefully, but he never expected to be interrupted by his senior brother first. He became furious. Senior brother wants me to die with him, but I just won't let you have your way. Yu Wufeng was originally the first senior brother of the South Sea Sword Pavilion, while senior brother is also the first senior brother of our myriad poison cult. We should decide who's stronger today. Stop arguing, senior brothers. You've made a fool out of yourself for no reason. Let's just ignore this kid and hurry back to the myriad poison cult. There will be a day when we claim his life in the future, the Spider Woman urged. The Spider Woman urged. She received the agreement of the elders and protectors too. They were rather worried about the myriad poison ancestors' sudden departure. Even if you can escort someone for 1,000 kilometers, they'll still have to part in the end. Please return, Cave Master Yu. We'll definitely come again in the future. Qian Liangmu clasped his hands. He personally believed that as a member of the royal clan, he would not be as vulgar as these southern barbarians. He would always display the bearing of a prince no matter what. Yu Wufeng said nothing. This time, only the 10 cave masters could stand a chance against him. Right when he was about to retreat resolutely, a strange sound suddenly rang out by his ear. The sound was like a dragon's cry, enough to stun ghosts and gods, ringing through the clouds. It was also like a Buddhist chant, righteous and righteous, delivering all life from suffering. When he heard it, even his soul trembled. Yu Wufeng immediately shut off his sense of hearing, but it was useless. The sound grew louder and louder, boundless and omnipresent. Since when did the South possess an ability like that? Yu Wufeng gazed into the distance. The red glow in the west seemed to be burning. The sound flew over from the layers of light. A speck of golden light flashed, like a bright star rising up in the night sky, growing brighter and brighter, growing closer and closer. It's her! Who is it? The Spider Woman cried out involuntarily. If it was said that Yu Wufeng only felt shock, then the members of the myriad poison cult felt actual pressure. The green cloud they controlled rippled, vaguely showing signs of shattering. It was no longer as relaxed as it was when it swallowed Yu Wufeng's sword. Little and was covered in brilliant light, but it was unable to conceal her dazzling golden light. Her bluish-white monk's robes rippled as she flew towards the green cloud. She opened her mouth slightly and unleashed the secret technique of the Chan monastery of Devanaga that even the golden cicada spirit king had to find a way to secretly learn, the chant of Devanaga. Her pair of spectral eyes were unfazed, seeing through all forms and space, comprehending the mysteries of the Buddhist Dharma. She pushed this Buddhist secret technique to the limit, but what she used was the path of white bone and great beauty that could destroy all Buddhas. It's her. Qian Liangmu gazed at the unforgettable face in the distance. He struggled to imagine that such a tremendous and profound voice actually came from the mouth of a petite woman like her. He had heard a long time ago that she was the most outstanding disciple of the Chan monastery of Devanaga in the past 1,000 years, yet she had risked everything to come to the south with Li Qingshan and risk her life. Under the great name of the King of Savages, she had remained silent the entire time, willing to serve as a foil, which made people unable to help but underestimate or even overlook her. After all, she had only undergone the second heavenly tribulation recently. Even if she was a genius, her strength was still limited. Only now did he come to a sudden realization that she was actually so powerful. She no longer seemed as obedient and pleasant as before. The bearing she gave off actually eclipsed all of them. She's that little and or whatever beside Li Qingshan. Perfect timing. Capture her and ask for a reward from Master. The centipede man pursed his lips in excitement. He had basically never heard of such great beauty. Perhaps he could even get close to her. Kill this bitch. The Spider Woman called out, her face filled with jealousy. Idiot. Qian Liangmu no longer cared about his bearing as a prince and cursed aloud, but his face was filled with shock. Chapter 808. Qian Liangmu's heart suddenly leapt into his throat. Those who had never seen Li Qingshan definitely could not. He wanted to experience the power and influence this man possessed. In terms of cultivation alone, Every single elder and protector here surpassed him. As a result, while he possessed startling accomplishments in battle, it was very difficult for him to take the name King of Savages too seriously based on what he had heard. Just like how the myriad poison ancestor did not care about how the banyan tree king referred to him as fellow, all the cultivators who had reached their realm of cultivation were talented prodigies. All of them had gone through many years of arduous cultivation. All of them were confident in their own strength. No matter what, Li Qingshan was far too young in his 30s. Qian Liangmu might seem like a young master on the surface, but according to the seniority of mortals, he was more than enough to be Li Qingshan's grandfather. The mighty greatest sect of the south had gathered their elites together. Even if the myriad poison ancestor was not present, why would they be afraid of a mere Li Qingshan's ambush? That was what they thought, and that was what the myriad poison ancestor thought too, which was why he left without worrying about their safety at all. However, Qian Liangmu had personally seen Li Qingshan and experienced the difference between them, so he understood fear. Since Li Qingshan was bold enough to draw away the myriad poison ancestor and purposefully intercept them here, he must have been quite confident. Glancing around, there were mountains and forests that rose and fell as far as the eye could see. Li Qingshan could be hiding anywhere. The vast surroundings suddenly became filled with killing intent, suffocating them. Little and pressed forward like a dazzling star, flying over from the western horizon. The chant of Devanaga became deeper and clearer, echoing through the surroundings. Even with the green clouds in the way, the elders and protectors felt their blood surge. They struggled to even focus their soul senses. The regular disciples were even worse off. They clutched their heads and collapsed on the clouds. They felt like their souls had been tossed into surging waves, about to be ripped apart and annihilated at any time. So this is the supreme cultivation technique of the Chan Monastery of Devanaga, the chant of Devanaga. Sure enough, it's something. Oh no, we can't let her continue using it. Let's strike together and take her down. As he spoke, Little and was already within 10 miles. The power of the chant of Devanaga was unleashed to the extreme, and he had no intention of slowing down at all. In just a breath's time, the two sides would officially engage in battle. The 10,000 poison cult's disciples were itching to give it a try. Just as they were about to attack, they suddenly felt their bodies become heavy, as if they were about to be pulled down from the sky. Their bodies staggered. The green cloud surged and was on the verge of collapse, and those normal disciples who were already suppressed by the chant of Devanaga in the first place spat out blood, feeling like their organs were about to rupture. Qian Liangmu's heart skipped a beat, and he suddenly raised his head. They're here. Amidst the white clouds, in the depths of the sky that was dyed red by the multicolored light, a black dot appeared. It was rapidly enlarging and falling at an unbelievable speed. The strong wind whistled past Li Qingshan's ears. Wisps of white turbulence appeared around Li Qingshan's body, leaving the white clouds far behind him. The dark green land blew in his face. He unfurled his wings of wind to the limit, and the flames of the phoenix blazed. Wind and fire merged together, dragging behind him like a long, glowing tail of a comet. After undergoing the phoenix's nerva and rebirth in fire, he unleashed this form again, but it was much faster and much more powerful than before. In the blink of an eye, the 10,000 poison cult had already arrived before him. He could clearly see the shock on their faces. The corner of Li Qingshan's lips curled into a smile. He spread open the fingers on his right hand and bent his right arm backwards. Have you ever heard of a palm style that descends from the sky? From the moment Qian Liangmu saw Li Qingshan, the sense of danger he had developed from experiencing countless life-or-death situations basically roared out. He took out a great shifting talisman he had been saving up for a very long time without any regard and activated it. However, his seniors and juniors, as well as the elders and protectors, clearly did not believe there was a need for that. His two seniors and juniors even mocked his cowardice inside, thinking about how they should report him to the myriad poison ancestor. An elder beamed with joy. He pointed at the sky and bellowed, "He's the king of savages, Li Qingshan. Take him down quickly. We've really searched far and wide for him, only to find him right before our eyes." There's a path in heaven, yet you refuse to take it, yet you barge into hell. Seriously? Li Qingshan slammed down with his palm, suddenly turning into a colossal palm. The huge shadow it cast down enveloped all of the myriad poison cult, crushing down like a mountain. Bang! The green cloud shattered, and there were many muffled explosions inside. Clouds of bloody mist rose up. Li Qingshan's descent slowed down. He unfurled his wings and folded them up, landing gently on the ground. He dispersed his demonic armor, and his scarlet eyes turned pitch black. His right hand returned to normal too. He swung it around and exhaled gently. This move is powerful, but it sure takes up quite a lot of energy and demon chi. Fortunately, my control over my power has indeed become much more refined after the Phoenix's Nerva. In the past, I'd have to smash into the ground before I could stop. Yu Wufeng widened his eyes and opened his mouth, unable to return to his senses for quite a while. After cultivating for all these years, he personally believed he was knowledgeable. He had seen all sorts of strange things, but he had never been as surprised as he was today. From the moment Little and appeared, he had been prepared to provide support. After all, she was in possession of the Blood Oath Scroll. When Li Qingshan descended from above, he swung the fogbow sword, ready to put on a good show. However, before he could even unleash a sword technique, Li Qingshan had already flown over with a swish. Who knew how many times faster than when he rode his sword? And then, the myriad poison cult was gone. 2 direct disciples, 3 protectors, 5 elders, as well as dozens of inner court disciples, all of them had vanished from the world. If it weren't for the faint smell of blood drifting in the wind, he would have suspected that the 10,000 poison cult had used some sort of miraculous mass teleportation technique. Even though he had witnessed it with his own eyes, he still struggled to believe it. The core elites of the myriad poison cult had all been slapped to death by a single palm strike like this? Ghost Shadow could not help but emerge from his concealment. His expression was no different from Yu Wufeng's. The strength of the ox and tiger, the speed of the phoenix, coupled with the tremors of the ox demon, the gravity of the earth, and the wings of wind formed a terrifying force. Let alone a group of second or first heavenly tribulation cultivators, even the myriad poison ancestor would be heavily injured if he managed to survive that strike. Of course, it was basically impossible for him to land a strike like this in a battle of the same level. Even with the suppression of strength, Li Qingshan wanted to make little and bait the enemies first, making them stay where they were and distract them. He made the spirit turtle calculate for a very long time before striking out boldly, launching a palm strike like this. And the outcome of being struck by his strike was no longer as simple as being reduced to mincemeat. All of their bones and flesh would be completely destroyed, reduced to a bloody mist. Coincidentally, the moment Li Qingshan landed on the ground, Little and flew over. She swung the blood sea banner and sucked the bloody mist and souls into it. Chapter 809. In the evening sky, a few stars had already opened their eyes silently, gazing over coldly. The world. A streak of green light swept past and suddenly halted. The myriad poison ancestor's expression changed drastically, becoming filled with disbelief. He murmured, "Impossible, impossible. Just who is it?" He refused to believe that Li Qingshan possessed the ability to do so. It was exactly this wrong assessment that made him pay a heavy price. He gritted his teeth, and a layer of green appeared on his face. He sped up and flew away without any regard for the cost of his cultivation. When he was close to where the people of the myriad poison cult had died, he suddenly heard a call from below. "Master! I'm here." Who was it? Who did it? The myriad poison ancestor arrived beside Chen Liangmu in a flash and grabbed him by the shoulder, asking viciously, "It was Li Qingshan. Just him? And that little and used the chant of Devanaga to intercept us. I sensed that something was amiss, so I used a great shifting talisman. Don't tell me, Chen Liangmu had escaped, but just now, he still doubted whether he had made a mistake. He was worried about how he was supposed to explain things to the myriad poison ancestor if Li Qingshan was not as dangerous as his instincts told him. Only now did he finally confirm he was right when he saw the myriad poison ancestors' expression, and the situation seemed to be even more severe than he had imagined. There were so many people. Did none of them escape? You sure know how to run. The myriad poison ancestor glared at Qian Liangmu. I deserve to die. Please punish me, master. Qian Liangmu said. Whatever. It's already impressive that you managed to escape. Once I ascend, you'll be the next leader of the myriad poison cult. Don't let me down. The myriad poison ancestor waved his hand and gradually calmed down. He gazed in the direction of Savage Mountain with a sunken face. Master, what should we do now? Qian Liangmu had no idea whether he should laugh or cry now that he had obtained what he had been dreaming of. He asked carefully. Li Qingshan and the others had probably fled back to Savage Mountain already. When Li Qingshan was not around, even if they gathered the strength of the entire myriad poison cult, they still could not take down Savage Mountain, let alone now when only the two of them remained. They would just be asking to be humiliated if they went. However, he was not bold enough to say that to the myriad poison ancestors. However, the myriad poison ancestor was not a mediocre person. It had just been many years since he suffered such a great loss, which was why he had been careless. Now that he had been dealt a heavy blow, he had already made up his mind. You go back to myriad poison cult to hold down the fort. I want to go somewhere. I will not rest until I crush Li Qingshan's bones and scatter his ashes. That's strange. The myriad poison ancestor actually hasn't attacked. So much for rushing back in such a hurry. Li Qingshan stood at the top of the tall tower on the main peak of Savage Mountain. He shaded his eyes with his hand and gazed at the sky. All he saw was the setting sun. The sky was as dark as ink, and the moonlight was like water. He's a sect master after all. He won't be so unwise. Little and sat on the edge of the tower. The stars reflected in his eyes as his long hair drifted in the night breeze. Fair enough. What a pity. I was planning on cursing him a little more. Li Qingshan looked away and said in some pity, he won't just swallow his anger. We still need to take precautions, said Little Anne, as long as the king of Southern Yu doesn't launch a full-scale attack, who can get through our Tree King formation? Li Qingshan smiled. In the valley, the banyan tree king sighed helplessly. I'll have to worry about this kid again. In my knowledge, there are still some. Little Anne said. Hopefully, it's not such a troublesome opponent, or it would not be impossible for the foundation of Savage Mountain to be destroyed in a day. Li Qingshan said, the world is vast, and there are as many powerful people as there are clouds. However, we won't be at the mercy of others anymore. We must repay them tenfold. In the Azura field. What's your relationship with that Li guy? We've worked so hard, yet you're the one who benefits the most. Yin Qing sighed emotionally. She stared at a bald demon general with average strength and low intelligence. He was King Millipede. Friends. Millipede likes friends. Millipede rubbed his head and smiled foolishly. Every single one of the dark green beads in his hand condensed with powerful spiritual energy. These were the main spoils of the battle, the 10 golden cores of the protector elders of the myriad poison cult. Due to their poison affinity, they were useless to Li Qingshan, so he tossed them all to Millipede. The 10 poisonous cores were enough for Millipede to save 1,000 years of time. His status as a demon commander was already set in stone, and his chances of becoming a demon king had increased drastically. Yin Qing was filled with admiration for this treatment. She felt even more admiration for Li Qingshan now. If she returned to the Azura realm one day, following an Azura king like this did not seem like a bad choice. However, right now, she should properly enjoy this rare vacation. Yin Qing sat down cross-legged and took out an exquisite teapot from a pile of 100 treasures pouches. She pinched a handful of tea leaves and brewed them with spiritual water. She filled a cup, and green smoke curled up as a strange fragrance wafted through the air. Millipede no longer looked at the poisonous cores. Instead, he stared straight at the teacup, drooling. Yin Qing put down the teacup. Sigh, you're so disgusting. Whatever. Wipe away your drool. I'll treat you to a cup. Your Majesty, the cave masters are awaiting your arrival at the Wild King Hall. They invite you over to give them instructions. Yu Wufeng arrived at the main peak and clasped his hands towards Li Qingshan at the top of the tower. His attitude had become extremely respectful. Although he had lost to Li Qingshan in the past and was forced to swear a blood oath, he had always been rather reluctant to accept it. He just felt like Li Qingshan did not make him stay behind with his own strength. However, after the battle today, his mind had become extremely shaken. The South Sea Sword Pavilion and the Myriad Poison Cult had been at odds for many years. They had always treated each other as mortal enemies. Countless hot-blooded battles and tragic sacrifices had been written between the South and the South Sea. As it turned out, it was all because of a single palm strike from him. Even if I undergo the third heavenly tribulation, I'm not his opponent. But the most terrifying part is that he's only in his 30s. Not only was he shocked by Li Qingshan's great strength, but he also felt like his worldview had been shattered and his horizons had been broadened. Li Qingshan leapt down. Let's go. The Savage King Hall was a hall built by the gentlemen of Heavenly Blubber on Savage Mountain. It was made from 1,000,000 tons of black basalt, sitting majestically on the mountain ridge. It had not been sculpted, but it gave off a primitive, savage aura. It seemed especially deep under the night sky. In the center of the hall was a black, rock throne. Below it were 10 slightly smaller seats to the left and right. The 9 cave masters had already taken their seats. Apart from Ghost Shadow, who remained silent, the other cave masters discussed and communicated with one another. The gentleman of Heavenly Blubber was the most active. At this moment, a tall figure appeared at the entrance of the hall. Li Qingshan strode in. The cave masters stood up at the same time, bowing and clasping their hands. Greetings, my king. Their unified voices echoed through the empty hall, filled with similar fear and respect. Li Qingshan walked past them and arrived before the black throne, examining it. The throne stood high up, its base fused with the ground. According to the aesthetics of the South, it was carved into many skeletons. However, the back of the throne was jagged like a sword, black rock that had not been carved. It stabbed straight into the sky. Li Qingshan shook his head. It's just a rock. Chapter 8:10. The gentleman of Heavenly Blubber wanted to turn Savage Mountain into a demonic sect. He had put in quite a lot of effort, but it had never gone well. The cave masters all had their own plans. None of them could tell what he was planning. Even that Li guy hasn't taken the initiative, yet you damn fatty blabbered on endlessly. Seriously, the eunuchs are more worried than the emperor. However, after this battle, the cave masters could not help but re-evaluate the feasibility of this plan. Since even the Myriad Poison Cult could do nothing to them, and Li Qingshan had even destroyed their entire sect, Savage Mountain was clearly about to rise up as the greatest organization in the South. It was even more impossible for them to rely on external forces to break free. As a result, the rock beneath Li Qingshan's bottom was no longer a rock, but a throne that grasped the power of life and death. It was enough to make people envious. One day, when Li Qingshan grew tired of sitting on it, whoever sat on it would become the new king of savages. Li Qingshan had no intention of founding some large organization, nor did he believe he had any talent for leadership. However, this was the cultivation community. Strength would obviously have people submitting to you. Strength could replace tactics and schemes. You've all worked hard with the Myriad Poison Cult's invasion this time. Li Qingshan waved his hand, and everyone answered loudly, "Serving the king is our duty. The Myriad Poison Cult has no idea what's good for them. I've already destroyed their entire sect, leaving only the Myriad Poison Ancestor. I still don't have confidence in killing him, so I'll spare him for now. I'll definitely make him pay the price in the future. Almighty my king. If it weren't for you today, of course, I wouldn't have been able to get through this formation, but I've already said it before. I'll remember who works for me. Especially Second Fatty. Look how much thinner you've become." Li Qingshan pointed at the first seat to his left. The wide, stone chair was basically unable to contain the gentleman of Heavenly Blubber's fat. The gentleman of Heavenly Blubber turned it down, but his fat jiggled from laughter. He changed the topic and said, "My king, as the saying goes, nothing can be accomplished without rules. Our savage mountain still needs a set of rules. We can't just rely on the blood oath scroll, just in case someone slacks at a critical moment and watches us make a fool out of ourselves. Li Qingshan glanced around. Do you have any objections? The cave masters expressed their approval one after another. Li Qingshan said, all right. Second fatty, I'll leave this matter to you. Wait. One of the cave masters stood up to stop them. Oh. Li Qingshan looked up and saw that the one who had spoken was actually the Marquis of Serene Sea. He thought to himself, ever since this old fellow made the blood oath, as long as I don't speak to him, he's never said a word. He doesn't think much of the other cave masters either. Why did he suddenly take the initiative to speak today? Marquis, what do you think? Don't tell me you have other thoughts and want to return to your Serene Sea Marquis residence? The gentleman of heavenly blubber turned around. The friendliness unique to fatties had suddenly vanished, replaced by a fierce-looking, hideous face. It was enough to remind people that he was also a notorious demonic cultivator in the south. I wholeheartedly agree with Second Cave Master's suggestion. However, the so-called rules are first and foremost to distinguish between superiors and inferiors. In the southern wilderness, there's nothing else, only strength matters. My king, I request a match to redetermine the rankings. I refuse to believe I'm only the 10th cave master. The Marquis of Serene Sea clasped his hands. Because he had sworn the blood oath last, he was ranked 10th. He had never taken this ranking seriously, but now he wanted to stand forward and fight for it. Even if he could not defeat Yu Wufeng, was he supposed to be unable to defeat this fatty? The gentleman of heavenly blubber's viciousness grew even heavier. He never expected the Marquis of Serene Sea to suddenly become enlightened and want to oppose him. A few other cave masters expressed their agreement with the Marquis of Serene Sea's suggestion. Once the organization was established, numbers were no longer just numbers, but status and authority. Who is willing to submit to others? The current ranking will definitely change in the future, but with me, it's not just strength that matters. There's also merit. The fire-devouring kings have taken advantage of my powerlessness and insulted my incompetence, so I wish to destroy them to prove that I'm not powerless or incompetent. What do you all think? Why don't you voice it out? Li Qingshan straightened his body and placed his hands on the armrests as he suddenly said that. The hall fell silent. Why did he suddenly mention the fire-devouring kings? The fire-devourers were in existence much more troublesome than the myriad poison cult. Across the entire Mist Province, there were many more large sects than the Green Province, but their foundations were nowhere close to the Green Province's. Often, only the sect master would be a great cultivator who had undergone the third heavenly tribulation, passing it down through the generations in the sect. This was because the conflict in the Mist Province was far too intense. Not only was it between sects, but it was also within sections. If Qian Liangmu became the leader of the myriad poison cult, his two senior brothers and junior sister would probably flee elsewhere. If they underwent the third heavenly tribulation and were unable to take back the position of sect master, they would be forced to start anew and establish a new sect. This was why there were so many sects in the Mist Province and so many independent cultivators. However, across the entire Mist Province, there was only a single fire devourer, and they had never split up. The force they had accumulated through the generations was not something the myriad poison cult could rival. Fire devourers were extremely belligerent. Once they were provoked, it would be like poking a hornet's nest. What? You've all gone mute. Li Qingshan said. Please reconsider, my king. The fire devourers are no trifling matter. They're riddled with masters. Savage Mountain's formations might be overseen by the Banyan Tree King, but they might not be able to stop them, said the Marquis of Serene Sea. The gentleman of heavenly blubber also cast aside their conflict and expressed his agreement with him. Once they declared war against the fire devourers, their chances of dying would increase drastically. The fire-devouring kings did not hold back when it came to killing. What a bunch of unreliable people. They'll do it when there's benefits and shrink back when there's trouble. Wufeng, what do you think? Li Qingshan asked the silent Yu Wufeng. I'm at your command, my king. I'm willing to serve you faithfully. Yu Wufeng immediately stood up. Li Qingshan frowned slightly. Originally, he wanted to see if he could borrow the South Sea Sword Pavilion's strength, but what Yu Wufeng was implying was that he did not want to drag the South Sea Sword Pavilion into this mess. This was why Li Qingshan had no interest in establishing some sort of organization, especially an organization established with a group of demonic cultivators. Rules and regulations were completely unreliable. Using the Blood Oath Scroll to issue orders was much easier. He snorted inside, "You bastards, you better go fill up the crater of the volcano when the time comes." Under Li Qingshan's malicious gaze, the hall fell silent again. It was dark, and everyone was speechless. Suddenly, a clear voice rang out from the entrance. "Young man, do you really plan on becoming enemies with the Fire Devourers?" The cave masters looked over, wondering who was bold enough to show such disrespect to Li Qingshan. All they saw was a woman in white standing there with a smile. Her skin was gentle like jade, seeming even fairer than her clothes, but she was only a foundation establishment cultivator. Meanwhile, little Anne, who wielded the power over their fates, stood beside her expressionlessly. "Don't be impudent. We're the king of savages now." Li Qingshan smiled and leaned back in his chair again. "Greetings, my king." Ru Exen arrived before the throne and bowed gracefully. She seemed to be in an extremely good mood. "What, you're still trying to persuade me not to become enemies with the Fire Devourers?" Li Qingshan said. Chapter 8:11. The cave masters looked at one another and exchanged glances. They secretly communicated with their soul sense. What a way this woman speaks. With her cultivation, she's actually saying she wants to destroy the Fire Devourers. Even if she undergoes the second heavenly tribulation, she's not even enough for the fire-devouring king to burn. Are you serious? You're not joking? Li Qingshan was rather surprised too. As it turned out, his hopes for Ru Exen were just to understand the inside story of the merfolk of the South Sea through her, and then find a way to convince the merfolk king to send troops to attack Fire Melt Mountain. He never thought she would want to destroy the Fire Devourers right off the bat. He stared into Ru Exen's eyes, trying to see through her thoughts. "That's the only thing I won't joke about. Though, give me some time. I need to undergo the second heavenly tribulation," said Ru Exen. "I don't want to believe you, but fine then. If there's anything you need, feel free to ask." Li Qingshan raised an eyebrow. He felt like her attitude had changed really quickly. She had gone from resolutely opposing it in the beginning to resolutely supporting it now. It was confusing. "First of all, gather as much information as you can on the recent movements of the merfolk of the South Sea and the Fire Devourers, but don't alert them. Don't take on an opposing stance against Fire Melt Mountain or get close to the merfolk of the South Sea. Secondly, capture some Fire Devourers for me. They don't have to be too powerful, but you have to keep it a secret. It's best if they mistakenly believe it was done by them. Finally, I need to gather a few things. I need everyone's cooperation." Ru Exen spoke with confidence and composure. Clearly, she had a plan in mind. Li Qingshan did not ask what she wanted to do. He agreed to everything and ordered the cave masters to cooperate. The cave masters were reluctant to be ordered around by a foundation establishment cultivator, but these tasks were still better than risking their lives against the Fire Devourers. Who knew when she would undergo the second heavenly tribulation? By then, perhaps Li Qingshan would have already cooled down and no longer wanted to attack Fire Melt Mountain. The cave masters accepted their orders and dispersed. Only Li Qingshan and Ru Exen remained in the gloomy hall. Their eyes met. Li Qingshan wanted to say something, but he suddenly waved his hand. "Forget it. You can say it when you want to say it. I want to talk about it now." Ru Exen smiled. "Then, but since you want to hear it so much, I feel like I'll be at a disadvantage if I tell you." Ru Exen twirled a strand of her hair. "Damn you." Li Qingshan cursed and laughed again. "You finally returned to normal." Although there was a hint of fierceness in his voice. "Have I ever been abnormal?" Ru Exen blinked her eyes, turned around, and waved her hand. "I'm going to attend to my business. Young man, just sit on the chair and wait." Watching Ru Exen leave, Li Qingshan leaned against the armrest and supported his head with his hand. he asked. Did you say something to her? It's nothing. She just said you're determined to attack Fire Melt Mountain and take the divine Wutong tree for cultivation, which made her happy. Little and sat sideways on the armrest and reached out to touch Li Qingshan's cheek. You don't have to eat her now. Li Qingshan gently scooped her into his arms with a smile. I'm afraid you won't be able to bear it. Who likes to chew rocks? At the same time, the myriad poison ancestor moved through the pitch-black jungle. He slowed down as if there would be a trap with every step he took. There was not a single person in the surroundings, but he could clearly sense countless prying eyes. He remained calm and composed. He believed the person he wanted to see would appear very soon. Suddenly he stopped. The darkness became thicker and thicker, like a pool of black water surging in the silence. In this extreme darkness, even the surrounding environment became grotesque and motley. The trees twisted vaguely, like drifting silhouettes, imprinted in the darkness even darker than the darkness. Shadowy, black plants grew around the myriad poison ancestor. They were densely packed, with huge buds on the slender stems. Thousands of buds bloomed at the same time, but what bloomed were not flowers, but mouths with crisscrossed fangs. They said together, "Let's go. Myriad poison, why aren't you enjoying yourself in the south? Why have you come to my shadow palace?" Every single voice was ear-piercing. Thousands of them stacked together, enough to make people want to go deaf. Even the myriad poison ancestor became slightly restless. He made up his mind. I want to ask you to kill someone for me, fellow. Oh, someone I can kill but can't. You should know that the Shadow Palace never assassinates targets above the third heavenly tribulation, whether it's humans, demons, or other folk, or half-human half-demons, half-human half-other folk, or half-other folk half-demons. The Shadow Queen spoke extremely quickly. Her shadow rose up and formed a triplet in the air. Every stroke turned into the silhouettes of humans, demons, and other folk before rapidly weaving together to form so-called half-human, half-demons, and so on. No, not the third heavenly tribulation, but the second heavenly tribulation. That's interesting. Li Qingshan, the myriad poison ancestor, struggled to hide his resentment. The king of savages, Li Qingshan. I refuse. Please return. The Shadow Queen seemed to consider it before turning him down firmly. Her shadow drew a cross in the air before drifting away. Hold on, you still haven't heard my reward. The myriad poison ancestor took a step forward and extended his hand. The shadow plants suddenly merged into a colossal shadow monster, blocking the myriad poison ancestor's path. It roared out, "Did the king of Southern you send you? Does he want to drag the night roamers into the war between humans? Go back and tell him he can forget about it. I wish him the best of luck forever. I wish him that his own kind will chop off his head." No, this has nothing to do with the king of Southern Yu, the Mist Province, or even the Green Province. It's all about me. The myriad poison ancestor hesitated before finally revealing his grievances with Li Qingshan. To him, this was a great humiliation that he struggled to mention. The shadow monster let out a strange cackle from time to time. In the end, it said, "Infiltrating the myriad poison cult and killing people? I suspect it's the handiwork of that ghost shadow from Savage Mountain." So you're talking about that child? I've let him rest up. It's time for him to come back and continue working. Thank you for telling me about him. I'll bring him back. Night roamers shouldn't be enslaved by others, but I don't think he has the ability. If you kill Li Qingshan, I'll shoulder all the blame. I'll announce that I was the one who took action. If you don't believe me, I can swear a venomous oath and take full responsibility for this matter. You'll receive 3 arcane treasures at the very least, as well as tremendous resources. The myriad poison ancestor said firmly. The venomous oath he spoke of was not an empty, venomous oath that mortals made. Instead, it was an oath that possessed great power. Unlike the blood oath scroll, it could only take effect out of complete willingness. After a moment of silence, the shadow monster shrank and turned into a blurry figure. It sat in front of the myriad poison ancestor and rubbed its head with its slender arm. All right, let's talk about the reward now. Quite a while later, the thick darkness receded like the tide. the jungle returned to normal. The myriad poison ancestor looked around. Even in the end, he was unable to grasp the Shadow Queen's location. A bright moon hung in the sky. On the branch of a huge tree, a pair of deep blue eyes watched the myriad poison ancestor fly off into the distance. She fiddled around with a tumor-like dark green sphere in her hand and smiled gently. Chapter 8:12. Li Qingshan, O Li Qingshan. Haven't you heard of the saying that a tall tree attracts the wind? Do you really think you can run amok like a king? I'll just borrow your head tonight. As she spoke softly, she blinked her deep blue eyes, and her figure drifted away under the moon. She flew over mountains and rivers, through the vast sea of trees. When the moon set in the west, she arrived outside Savage Mountain. She circled around it and praised inside. It's no wonder that even myriad poison can't force his way in. These formations aren't particularly special, but the way they operate them can be described as having reached the pinnacle of perfection. If I want to sneak in without anyone noticing, it really will be rather troublesome. However, it was just troublesome. Very soon, the Shadow Queen passed through the thick mist and arrived in the valley. A huge tree towered into the sky in the valley, extremely eye-catching. She was taken aback. Why does this tree seem so familiar? And it seems to be the core of the protective formation. No way. Since when does the old tree king help people with something like guarding their home? Don't tell me it's just another banyan tree demon that looks similar? Filled with surprise, the Shadow Queen approached the banyan tree king. She wanted to investigate it more closely, but the sight below the tree only made her even more surprised. It was late at night right now, the time when night roamers were active. Night roamers came and went on the streets of the town that had just taken shape. There were both men and women, young and old. The older people still behaved in a quiet manner, making no sound at all. As for the young people and children, it was much livelier. They drank and feasted under the moon, playing around on the streets. If it were not for their ink-blue skin and pointed ears, if it were not for the fact that the children moved as nimbly as a black panther when they played around, they were basically no different from humans. They seemed like a paradise that stood aloof from the world, tranquil and peaceful. The Shadow Queen slowed down and made her way through the streets. She was extremely confused inside. Is this really Savage Mountain? Why are there so many clansmen here? The children laughed as they passed through her body and disappeared into the corner of the street. Their laughter still lingered. She shook her head slightly, convinced that she had not fallen into some kind of illusion. The only person who could create such a realistic illusion and deceive her perception was probably that old monster from the South Sea. However, that old monster had never left the sea, and it was even more impossible for him to appear here. As the Shadow Queen approached the depths of the town, she became more and more surprised. Not only were there so many night roamers here, but their cultivations had also exceeded her expectations. According to her senses, there were 4 night roamers who had undergone the second heavenly tribulation in the valley alone, and there were even more who were close to this realm. They were just stuck at a bottleneck. If they were given enough resources and the right guidance, they would be able to become a core force of the Shadow Palace. I've really made the right decision to come here. Compared to magic treasures, this is the most precious thing. The Shadow Queen was rather excited too. After all, the greatest restriction to other folk was their population. They followed the ancient law of nature. The more powerful the bloodline, the more difficult it was for them to reproduce. As a result, every single clansman was extremely important. Even if they were not powerful, they could still contribute to the expansion of the race. She approached the banyan tree king, and her eyes suddenly narrowed. It really is this kid. The third cave master of Savage Mountain, Ghost Shadow, had changed from his secretive and silent ways. He currently stood under the canopy, on a damaged stone pedestal, loudly preaching something. A circle of male night roamers gathered around him, listening closely. His voice drifted over with the wind. We might be men, and our talent might not be as great as women, but that doesn't mean we should be inferior to others. Without our efforts, the night roamers would have gone extinct a long time ago. If we don't plant our seeds, will the earth sprout by itself? There was a series of cheers below the pedestal. In particular, as cultivators, we're even more equal, and our talent is actually better than most humans and demons. We can't give up on ourselves. We have to work hard on cultivation and change our status. Isn't the savage king who rules over us right now a man? Everyone, say it with me. We have to become stronger. We have to become stronger. The male night roamers raised their arms and called out, "All men unite. We're not tools for procreation. All men unite. We're not tools for procreation." Some of the young men shed tears of excitement, gazing at Ghost Shadow in great admiration. Although many female night roamers in the surroundings glanced at one another, no one stepped forward to stop them. After all, Ghost Shadow's strength was right there, and the cultivation method he passed down allowed everyone to benefit tremendously. If he wanted to say something, they would let him say it. Has this kid's brain become damaged after spending a few years in the South? Don't tell me he's trying to learn from humans and act like men are superior to women? I'd like to see what he's thinking. The Shadow Queen walked over and stared into Ghost Shadow's eyes. She was proficient in mind reading, and it was extremely effective against her own clansmen. In order to make it easier for him to speak, Ghost Shadow took off the mask he wore all year round, revealing a handsome face unique to night roamers. He was complacent, even more delighted than when he had assassinated a powerful enemy. Although he had betrayed the Shadow Palace and fled, as an other folk who had grown up in a race, he still cared about his clansmen quite a lot. The feeling of being connected by blood was not something humans could understand. Before human cultivators, he was a cold assassin, but he yearned for the recognition of his clansmen. During this period of time, he passed on knowledge to the night roamers as a tutor, earning him great respect. His once wounded heart was deeply satisfied, and he became determined to change the status of male night roamers. This was not just for his ideals, but the first step to interfering with the race. He thought, "I'm stronger than Yi Liusu. If I undergo the third heavenly tribulation one day, I don't have to be some savage king. I'll just be the king of these night roamers. I'll call myself the Shadow King and show that old hag the Shadow Queen my power." Thinking up to there, Ghost Shadow suddenly shivered. The night wind seemed to chill slightly. He looked around and experienced an ominous feeling for some reason. Old hag. You better be prepared to die of old age in bed," the Shadow Queen said viciously. She raised her head and gazed over. "Though, this tree really does seem more and more like it the more I look at it." "Weiyang, is that you?" Ocean's ancient voice suddenly rang out in her head. Yi Weiyang sighed. "Tree King, it really is you. If it were someone else, it would have been impossible for them to discover her existence. Hee, only you can enter the valley silently. Why don't you give up on the assassination and sit down and have a chat with him?" The Banyan Tree King said. Li Qingshan was currently leaping down from the main peak. "Just what benefits did Li Qingshan give you to make you act so biased? Not only do you help him maintain the formations, but you even divulged my whereabouts." Yi Weiyang was rather displeased. If the Banyan Tree King had kept so many night roamers from her because he was abiding by his principles, she could understand that, but he had gone too far. He had gone against the basic principles he had always followed. Chapter 8:13. Oh. Yi Weiyang could not help but re-evaluate Li Qing, who flew through the air above Savage Mountain. Li Qing was scanning the surroundings. Clearly, he had not discovered her location and had only sensed something. However, if it was just the instincts of a sudden impulse, then that would be far too sharp. It did not match his cultivation. The Banyan Tree King was definitely not someone who lied. From what he was implying, if they clashed, it would be detrimental to her as well. However, that was a little too unbelievable. He was only at the second heavenly tribulation. No matter what kind of startling abilities he possessed, he would only be at the third heavenly tribulation at most. If she wanted to, she could still assassinate him. As a result, she said, "It's not that I don't believe you, but I still have to give it a try. I'll have to see whether he has the right to sit down and talk with me." The Banyan Tree King said, "Then go ahead and give it a try." Li Qingshan was currently cultivating in the center of the mountain when he suddenly felt a sense of danger. He left the hall and arrived on the main peak to take a look. All he saw was the gentle night breeze, the bright moon, and the gloomy banyan tree. There was nothing out of the ordinary. "What's wrong?" Little and arrived beside him. Li Qingshan told him what he felt. The sense of danger was so fleeting, barely discernible. "Perhaps I've made a mistake. Logically speaking, what kind of danger can I encounter if I stay on Savage Mountain?" "No, there's another possibility." Little and shook his head gently. He took out the bamboo jade lot of the cloud bookcase and closed his eyes to divine. "What possibility?" "The Shadow Queen." Little and opened his eyes. The result of the divination was nothing, but that was within his expectations. Only the king of assassins of the Mist Province, the Shadow Queen, could make him feel threatened on Savage Mountain while hiding from and deceiving his instincts. Fooling regular divination was nothing difficult. Myriad poison can't fight his way in, so he's asking for reinforcements? After being pointed out by Little N, the faint sense of crisis immediately became clear. Although it was still so weak that it was easy to ignore, Li Qingshan straightened his face and did not dare to be careless again. None of these kings and queens who had gone through 3 heavenly tribulations were easy to deal with, not to mention assassins who were good at defeating stronger opponents. Comparing the two, he was probably not the stronger one. "Maybe she's already here." Li Qingshan flew down. His forehead lit up and turned into a single crystal-like eye. It shot out a beam of red light and scanned the valley. At the same time, he spread out his divine sense to search, but naturally he found nothing. If she could discover her existence so easily, she wouldn't be a movie queen. Li Qingshan flew into the sky again. His eyes suddenly became tranquil, as blue as the ocean, allowing the spirit turtle to divine. The sense of danger became heavier and clearer, but it seemed to be shrouded by a black curtain, unable to find the source of danger. As a result, he no longer had any doubts. The Shadow Empress was here, but where exactly was she? Suddenly, he had a flash of inspiration. A power was prying into his mind. Using this thread of karma, he immediately obtained a result. "This, right in front of me." Li Qingshan's face tensed up. Without saying anything else, he threw a punch forward. Yi Weiyang arrived before Li Qingshan and rubbed her chin as she studied this man known as the King of Savages. She was in no hurry to strike. You really do have some extraordinary bearing. The toughness of his body far surpasses that of regular people. He can rival demon commanders or even surpass them. There really aren't a lot of people who can stop him at the second heavenly tribulation. He can be described as a prodigy of talent. It's no wonder the Tree Lord treats him differently. However, if that's all there is to it, then tonight will be the night you die. Let me read your thoughts again. Just as Yi Weiyang used the mind-reading technique, Li Qingshan suddenly opened his eyes. His presence surged like a tsunami, surging through the boundless night and gathering in his right hand. His fist tore through the air. Yi Weiyang was finally moved. Not only was she shocked that he could discover her, but she was also shocked by the ferocity of this punch. Originally, in her current state, she could withstand most attacks without any problems. However, facing this punch, she felt something that she had not felt for a long time. Suppression. However, she was not at the level of Ghost Shadow, whose body twisted and moved like a shadow. Bang! Li Qingshan's punch landed in the air. In that instant, Endless Night felt as if he had been struck by lightning. The power of the shock spread out like a ripple. The space also rippled, and a shadow appeared in the air. In an instant, a white bone sword stabbed toward the shadow. Little and had made her move. Under the bright moon, the sword did not return. Her long hair fluttered in the wind, and she looked like a fairy from another world. The bone sword was the same as her. It did not have any particularly shocking power. It did not reveal any aura, and even the moonlight was not tainted. It was just an ordinary sword that stabbed out. This was a sword that could kill Buddha. "I've been assassinated." Yi Weiyang found this absurd. It was not because she had been careless, but because she had never thought that someone could hide their aura to this extent. Even she had not sensed it. However, a moment later, she realized that she had still underestimated this sword. The Buddha-slaying sword pierced through the darkness, and the shadow scattered like rags. The moonlight was bright, and the sky was boundless. Li Qingshan and Little N had their backs to each other. They communicated with their divine senses, as expected of the Shadow Empress. My punch only forced her out. It probably did not cause any damage. Little N said, my sword must have injured her. I just don't know how effective it was. But I have to let her know that my Savage Mountain is not a place where she can come and go as she pleases. Right now, it's true that she can come and go as she pleases, Little N said. There were probably not many people in the world who could kill her. Girl, don't be led astray by Ru Exen. Since you can't do it through force, you can do it more civilly. In the quiet night, Li Qingshan's voice suddenly broke the silence. He clasped his hands and said, I was unaware that the Shadow Empress had come to visit. I, Li Qingshan, have failed to welcome you from afar. Why don't you show yourself and have a drink with me? Under the great banyan tree, the night roamers were alarmed. They all raised their heads and looked around. When Ghost Shadow heard the two words, Shadow Empress, his face changed drastically. Although he knew it was useless, he still looked around instinctively. The Shadow Empress. She's here. Has she come to take me away? If she learns about my plans, wouldn't that mean? When he thought up to there, he no longer dared to think about it anymore. He dismissed his thoughts in a hurry and stopped letting his thoughts run wild. With that punch alone, you're worthy of the title of King of Savages. Coupled with that strike, it's no wonder you can sweep through the south. Even the King of Southern Yu has underestimated you. Yi Weiyang's voice rang out slowly, drifting about. Hearing this voice, Ghost Shadow's face became even paler. Li Qingshan frowned slightly. Even with the power of the spirit turtle, he was unable to lock onto her location. This was the power of the greatest assassin of the Mist Province. She really did live up to her reputation. We've never had any grievances. I even have so many night roamers under my command, so we can be regarded as kindred spirits. Don't tell me you've been instigated by the myriad poison monster to oppose me? Before you say that, why don't you try to survive first, Li Qingshan? Chapter 8:14. With a gentle wave of his right hand, he ripped open an abyss in the vast moonlight, like a huge, black mouth with crisscrossed fangs. Thousands of shadow crows flapped their wings and surged over like a black tide, swallowing Li Qingshan and Little N Master. Yi Liubo heard the disturbance and emerged from her dwelling. When she saw this, she cried out in surprise. Yi Weiyang glanced at her and felt displeased. With your strength, you actually have to acknowledge someone as your master. You've really embarrassed the night roamers. Once I kill them, I'll take you back to the Shadow Palace and train you properly. That's. After the crows flew past, an azure blue sphere hovered in the air, enveloping Li Qingshan and Little N. Although it was riddled with cracks, it managed to block all of the attacks. Yi Weiyang was slightly surprised. He actually managed to block it. What a powerful defense. However, this did not seem to be a technique, but an innate ability of demons. As it seemed, he also possessed the bloodline of demons, which gave her a slight understanding of why the Banyan Tree King wanted to protect him. Shadow Queen, feel free to use whatever moves you have, Li Qingshan said. Gloomy demon Qi turned into a set of vicious demonic armor, and the demon dragon sword spiraled out, producing a dragon's roar as it pointed straight at the Shadow Queen. Just now, when the crows passed through, the Banyan Tree King's voice rang out in his head, I want to resolve this matter for you and bring peace to both sides. However, she'll only accept it after seeing your strength, so do your best. Li Qingshan thanked the Banyan Tree King inside. It really was all thanks to him that he could come to the Mist Province this time. However, if he wanted to resolve this crisis, he still needed to rely on his own strength. Before he had even finished speaking, a cry rang out by his ear, all right. The moonlight cast a long shadow beneath Li Qingshan's feet. Suddenly, it sprung alive, turning into a blurry figure. One hand wrapped around Li Qingshan's neck from behind, while the other turned into a blade and plunged into his back. Blood spurted out, turning into flames. Whether it was the demonic armor or the spirit turtle's profound shell, they were completely useless. Li Qingshan's pupils constricted as he made a backhanded grab. The demon's subduing pagoda suddenly appeared and condensed above his head, casting down a huge shadow. It was accumulating power and was about to strike down. As long as he could pull her into close combat, even the strongest assassin would have to die here. Little and also attacked at the same time. The Buddha-slaying sword pierced through the shadow without a sound. Li Qingshan also grabbed thin airs. The shadow twisted and retreated, returning to Li Qingshan's feet, becoming an ordinary shadow. It turned out that it wasn't Yi Weiyang's real body, but rather, it was just a spell that she had cast. It was so vicious and sinister that it was impossible to defend against it. All of this happened in a split second. At this moment, the flames from the blood had only produced a single spark before returning to Li Qingshan's body. The wound closed up immediately. Before Li Qingshan could even relax, another wave arose before the first had even settled. Thousands of shadow plants grew out of the space there, extending and curling around the spirit turtle's profound shell firmly. The spirit turtle's profound shell creaked as the cracks became denser and denser. It was already on the verge of shattering. Isn't the heart a weak point? Then let's try here. Yi Weiyang's figure suddenly appeared. She held a small bow that resembled a crescent moon in her hand, while she held a fine grain of sand that shone with silver light in her right hand. The bow was the crescent moon bow, a supreme treasure that had been passed down through the ancient kingdom of night. It had always been wielded by the Shadow Queen in the Shadow Palace, while the sand was stellar sand, refined from stellar stones. She drew the bowstring that resembled silver threads, and the fine sand flickered like stars. She aimed it right at Li Qingshan's forehead and loosened it gently. It was called the crescent moon shooting form. A streak of starlight pierced through the air. The spirit turtle's profound shell shattered loudly. The fragments scattered and shone brightly. Li Qingshan swung the demon dragon sword. The tip of the sword trembled, blocking the stellar sand, but he did not feel much resistance. He thought on. The starlight suddenly scattered, turning into thousands of silver threads that landed on Li Qingshan's body. His body only felt a slight pain, like he had been bitten by insects. But in that moment, thousands of stars lit up in Li Qingshan's soul, flickering as if they wanted to shatter his soul. Even his will wavered. As it turned out, this move was not meant to harm the body, but to directly attack the soul. Sigh, I've wasted another grain of stellar sand. Since the body is tough, I'll attack the soul and sea of consciousness. That's the way of assassination. Li Qingshan, oh Li Qingshan. You've suffered 3 fatal strikes from me in a row. You won't die in vain. Yi Weiyang stowed the crescent moon bow away and looked at Li Qingshan, but she was disappointed once again. The spirit turtle suppresses the seas. Li Qingshan bellowed inside. The figure of the spirit turtle appeared, shining brightly and suppressing the stars. The phoenix danced through the air, repairing his damaged soul. A while later, his mind cleared up and he said proudly, "Is that all?" Yi Weiyang let out an interjection of surprise. She understood the power of the crescent moon bow the best. She thought even if Li Qingshan survived, he would faint. That was because people with tough bodies often lacked the tempering of their souls. However, she did not know that Li Qingshan practiced the 4 transformations of the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine. His soul was even stronger than his body. Suddenly, she thought of something, and the Buddha-slaying sword swung down from behind. As it turned out, when Li Qingshan drew away Yi Weiyang's attention, Little and had already circled around her silently. Against an opponent like her, the skull prayer beads and the blood sea banner were not particularly effective. Only the Buddha-slaying sword was bold enough to land a blow on her. Qing's punch came effortlessly. This damned girl, why isn't she breathing at all? If I get injured again, I'll be utterly humiliated tonight. I'll show you what's good for this time. With a flash, Yi Weiyang dodged the strike. She was slightly annoyed inside. His deep blue eyes stared at the beautiful face that was as tranquil as water. He swung the crescent moon star shooting bow in his hand, and the bowstring suddenly flew out, sweeping towards Xiao En's neck like a blade. Little and ignored it, continuing to swing at the Shadow Queen. It was just the same plain strike, without any sharp light or chilling sword chi. Nice. Li Qingshan praised inside. He never thought that not only would her cultivation progress so quickly in the past few years in the Chan monastery of Devanaga, but even her swordsmanship had improved so much. She had merged the Buddhist Dharma and Zen principles into the path of the sword, breaking away from the sword intent of the three absolutes calligraphy and forming a style of her own. Yi Weiyang brushed past Little and dodged Li Qingshan's attack at the same time, but a bloody mark appeared on her face. Although she had dodged the Buddha-slaying sword, she was still injured by the invisible sword chi, which made her even more furious. However, compared to the damage she had caused, this was basically a negligible sacrifice. She was actually so fearless of her life. A thin, bloody mark appeared on Little Anne's fair neck, circling around it. The bowstring had already severed it, but she still paid no attention to it. She combined their swords with Li Qingshan and charged towards the Shadow Queen again. Yi Weiyang's body flickered, swimming through the blades. Her heart was filled with disbelief. She's been beheaded, but she's actually treating it like nothing. Is she still human? In this world, unless they were ghosts, the body was extremely important. No matter how high their cultivation was, they could not be damaged so easily. However, Little and even Li Qingshan had both broken this common sense. Speaking from their very nature, they were not human. Little Anne practiced the path of white bone and great beauty, so her body was just an illusion. When the bowstring swept past, it only separated her neck bone slightly. Li Qingshan went without saying. Only someone who could overwhelm him with absolute strength like the Dragon King of the Sea could kill him. The two of them worked together to fend off a powerful enemy. They were extremely well coordinated. Sword chi interwove and layered on top of each other. However, Yi Weiyang moved through the streaks of light like a fish in the surging waves. She was completely unscathed. In the end, she leapt up and merged into the night again. For now, it's difficult for her to pose a fatal threat to me and Shaoan, but it's almost impossible to kill her. If she keeps dodging, we won't even be able to harm her. She really is the most difficult person to deal with since coming to the southern border. Li Qingshan furrowed his brows in thought. Compared to the Shadow Queen, the fire-devouring kings instead posed a greater threat to him, as the strength of assassins lay in targeting vital points and defeating those stronger than them despite being weaker. However, if they did not have any vital points, the threat of an assassin would be drastically reduced. Meanwhile, the fire-devouring king's powers of flames could crush them head-on. No matter what their weak points were, they would be burnt to a crisp as long as they were not strong enough. However, in comparison, killing the Shadow Queen was much more difficult than killing the fire-devouring kings. The two of them are at the second heavenly tribulation, but the strength they've demonstrated is already close to third heavenly tribulation cultivators. And I don't know what cultivation method they practice, but their bodies are vastly different from regular people. Piercing their hearts and beheading them is useless. No wonder the myriad poison is so generous. I didn't think the matter would actually be so troublesome. Yi Weiyang was no longer as relaxed as she was in the beginning. She began to think seriously. If I want to kill him, I'll have to take some risks and engage him in close combat. Yi Weiyang's eyes turned cold, and she silently took out a dagger. The dagger was around a foot in length and completely black and transparent, like a half-transparent shadow. A black snake coiled around the hilt. Her killing intent immediately sharpened. The spirit turtle let out a shrill warning. Li Qingshan frowned. Shadow Queen, if you attack again, I'm going to run. Yi Weiyang found this rather funny. If he had said it out loud, then so be it, but he actually used a threat like that. You can try to kill me, or there will be a day when I flatten the Shadow Palace. Li Qingshan said resolutely. He unfurled his phoenix wings to the limit, and the fierce winds began to whistle. He was only waiting to flap his wings and take flight. He could not deal with the Shadow Queen, but was the Shadow Queen supposed to kill him so easily? If you insist on going against me today, don't blame me for returning the favor tenfold in the future. Alright, then I'll try. Why would Yi Weiyang allow herself to be threatened? She smiled coldly and swung the dagger, about to strike. All of you, get over here. The Banyan Tree King's ancient voice suddenly rang out, echoing through the mountains and demonstrating great dignity. Yi Weiyang and Li Qingshan were both taken aback. The Banyan Tree King had a mild temperament and was particular about letting nature take its course. He rarely gave orders so sternly. Although he had always been as gentle and benevolent as an old grandfather, even the Shadow Queen dared not disobey him once he became stern. She revealed herself and arrived before the great banyan tree. This was not out of fear, but out of respect. Whether it be the night roamers or the Shadow Queen herself, they had all benefited greatly from him. Chapter 8:15. The curved moon sank a little further. Their clash had only lasted for a moment, and the danger Li Qingshan had faced was one of the few battles he had faced in his life. He had not used his full strength, and the Shadow Queen had clearly held back too. If they continued fighting, Li Qingshan personally believed he could not do anything to her. Taking a beating passively was not in his character, so all he could do was avoid her for now. However, if he did that, his series of plans in the south would be greatly affected. Now that the Banyan Tree King had stepped forward to mediate, it was for the best. As a result, he arrived before the great banyan tree and maintained his distance from the Shadow Queen. Although she had appeared, she was still blurry as if she could merge with the darkness at any time. It was even more impossible to see her face clearly. Li Qingshan did not disperse his demonic armor either. He temporarily folded up his phoenix wings, letting them hang on his back like two balls of fire. He could not place all his hopes on others at any time. He had to be prepared for the worst. Please allow me to mediate for the two of you. Although the Banyan Tree King said please, his tone left no room for negotiation. The cloud-like canopy swayed gently in the night wind, producing a rustling sound. It was a tangible sense of the dignity this demon king of the Mist Province possessed. Please go ahead. Yi Weiyang fiddled around with the shadow dagger in her hand and glanced at Li Qingshan. Weiyang, you said you wanted to test his qualifications, so I let you try. What do you think now? The Banyan Tree King asked. He's qualified. Yi Weiyang could not help but admit this. His strength could be described as exceeding her expectations. Then let's sit down and talk. The Banyan Tree King said. Two aerial roots drooped down, coiling into two seats. A wooden pillar rose up between the seats, holding a simple, wooden teapot and a few teacups. There's no need to talk. He's actually using the Shadow Palace to threaten me. He's definitely going to die tonight. Yi Weiyang did not sit down. Although she respected the Banyan Tree King, she still had her pride as the Shadow Queen. Then let's give it a try. Li Qingshan laughed, baring his fangs. He was never a kind person. If the two of you can really fight to the death, how can I be a good person for nothing? If you trust me, then sit down. The Banyan Tree King said. He was not a peacemaker who would stick his nose into everything. His mediation was to protect the interests of both parties. At this point, Yi Weiyang couldn't say anything more. She sat down, and Li Qingshan also sat opposite her. They looked at each other warily. Qingshan, this mediation is related to the success or failure of your matters in the southern border. You can't fight because of personal feelings anymore. I am willing to help you resolve today's crisis. Weiyang, I've known you for a long time and can be considered to have an understanding of your strength. This mediation concerns the future of you and the Shadow Palace, so you can't underestimate me anymore. I'll help you avoid future disasters. The Banyan Tree King's voice was calm and magnanimous. Moreover, it was all for their sake, so they couldn't help but submit. When Yi Weiyang heard the solemn tone of the Banyan Tree King, she couldn't help but re-examine Li Qingshan in front of her. He is only 30-something years old now, but he already has such strength. Furthermore, it seems like he hasn't used his full strength yet. How terrifying. If he is given another 30 years, he might really become a person whose name will shake the world. That girl called little and is not below him in terms of talent. The future disasters that the Tree King mentioned are not empty words. If the two of you have no objections, then please show your true face to show your sincerity. The Banyan Tree King said. Li Qingshan extended his hand and picked up the teapot, pouring himself a cup of tea. The vicious armor on his hand turned to dust and dispersed, disintegrating inch by inch. He took a sip of the tea and stared at his face in the clear tea. Demonifying to hide his identity as the North Moon was quite a good idea. Little and accepted the teapot from the side and poured a cup for the Shadow Queen. She made a gesture of please. Her composure gave off an ethereal aura. Li Qingshan needed to take a forceful stance. He could not back down, so she had come to express his sincerity in his place, urging him to mediate this time. Even though they were enemies, Yi Weiyang could not help but sigh in admiration of her bearing. However, she found their relationship even more difficult to understand. Brother and sister? Couple? But they did not seem like it either. She accepted the teacup and nodded at little Anne. She held the teacup and sipped it carefully. She was extremely elegant, completely different from her malevolence and viciousness when she was assassinating someone. Compared to human nobles, night roamers could be regarded as even more ancient nobles, one of the 7 divine kingdoms. A pair of large, deep blue eyes emerged from the blurry shadows, as if they had parted the thick mist and revealed themselves. The corner of Li Qingshan's eye twitched. He was rather surprised. The greatest assassin of the Mist Province actually had a harmless, babyish face. Coupled with her petite figure, she seemed like a young girl, which was quite different from what he had imagined her to be. Of course, her actual age was definitely much older than she seemed on the surface. What are you looking at? Yi Weiyang sat with her legs crossed and placed her right arm on the table, propping up her cheek. She picked up a cup of tea with her left hand and drank it all in a single gulp as she said coldly. However, her voice was gone too. Just now, it had become rather sweet and gloomy, and it no longer seemed as dignified as before. Although she had become a cutie in a single second, Li Qingshan did not relax at all. The Shadow Queen was still the Shadow Queen. At the same time, he stared at her closely, which made Yi Weiyang very unhappy. The banyan tree king sighed inside. It was said that when people were angry, their intelligence would be no different from that of a child, so he did not do something like pacifying a child. I've already stated the pros and cons clearly, so let's talk about it. If you leave right now, I'll treat it like nothing has happened. Li Qingshan lowered the curtain and said indifferently, for the sake of the Tree King, I can spare your life. I'll be taking all the night roamers here with me. Yi Weiyang placed down the teacup and said firmly. Don't even think about it. Li Qingshan's voice was just as indifferent as before, but it was filled with unparalleled determination. Then there's no need to talk about it. They're my clansmen. I definitely won't let them wander outside and become slaves. Even if I have to use everything the Shadow Palace has, I'll take them back with me. No matter what kind of trouble there is, my Shadow Palace can endure it. Yi Weiyang leaned forward and stared at Li Qingshan with her large, deep blue eyes. Her murderousness permeated the surroundings. They followed me for many years. I won't sell them out for a moment of temporary safety. Li Qingshan slammed the table and stared back at her without backing down. He refused to back down. Honestly speaking, as his strength rapidly increased, this group of night roamers no longer held much actual value to him. However, with his relationship with Yi Liubo and Yi Liusu, it was impossible for him to just hand them over so easily. This answer left Yi Weiyang rather surprised. Then she sneered. Originally, I thought you were a little heroic, not as hypocritical as regular humans. I didn't think you'd actually say something so shameless. She had saved many clansmen in the past, so she could completely imagine just how oppressed night roamers would be under the rule of an alien race. They seemed peaceful and happy on the surface, but it could not change the reality that they would be treated as slaves, ordered around and toyed around with as they pleased. Whether I'm shameless or not isn't something you can judge. They live and work in peace and contentment here. If you want to take them away with a single word, you'll have to ask whether they're willing or not. Li Qingshan said. All right, then I'll cut to the chase. Let's make a bet. If they're willing to leave with me, you can't stop them. The corner of Yi Weiyang's lips curled slightly. That was exactly what she had been waiting for. Then what if they're unwilling? Li Qingshan asked. As you wish. Yi Weiyang said. Who would be willing to be oppressed by an outsider instead of being with their own clansmen? Whether it be from the perspective of emotions or benefits, it was impossible. Lu Su, Lu Bo, Lu Xing, come over here. "Oh right, and you, Ghost the Third," Li Qingshan said. Yi Liusu and her sisters had been paying attention to the activity here the entire time. In the blink of an eye, they arrived over and bowed. "Greetings, my king, and Mon M Shadow Queen." Ghost Shadow slowly appeared too, directly dropping to one knee and saying nothing. He originally wanted to flee, but when he thought about how it was impossible for him to escape from the Shadow Queen's grasp, he could only accept his fate. In the past, he was able to escape from the Shadow Palace all because of Yi Weiyang's benevolence, which was equivalent to giving him a holiday. As it seemed now, no matter how long a holiday was, it would come to an end eventually. When he thought of his life in the Shadow Palace, he could not help but grimace, unable to say anything. Yi Weiyang did not even glance at Ghost Shadow. She studied Yi Liusu and her sisters. Although they were all of the same race, females were still more reliable at the end of the day. Especially Yi Liusu, who was clearly the leader of the group, had a calm attitude, neither servile nor overbearing, which satisfied her the most. In the Shadow Palace, there were many juniors who were stronger than her, but this kind of bearing was very rare. Considering that she had wandered outside and had not been carefully nurtured, she was especially valued. You all heard what was said just now. If you have any thoughts, feel free to speak freely. With me here, no one can force you to do anything. Yi Weiyang said warmly, as if she was licking her calf, causing Li Qingshan's heart to move. He said, "You have all followed me for many years, and I have never let you down. Even now, I am not willing to force you to do anything. Who is this Shadow Queen, and what kind of place the Shadow Palace is? I believe Ghost the Third has told you a lot. All good things must come to an end. If you want to return to your race, I will not blame you." Yi Weiyang looked at Li Qingshan in surprise. She did not expect that not only did he not obstruct them, but he also expressed his stance like this. Could it be that there was some conspiracy? Li Qingshan responded with a smile, which made him seem even more magnanimous. "Master, I will never leave you." Yi Liubo immediately arrived beside Li Qingshan. Her eyes were filled with admiration and admiration. Yi Weiyang frowned. Sure enough, there was a scheme. She never thought this despicable kid would actually use love to bewitch people. However, a night roamer who could be bewitched by love was not worth her attention. She could tell a long time ago that Yi Liubo's talent was not particularly impressive. She had basically reached her limit by cultivating to this point. It was basically impossible for her to advance any further. What determined the direction of this group of night roamers was still Yi Liusu. Yi Liusu sank into her thoughts. Yi Liuxing gazed at her silently, waiting for her to make a decision. Quite a while later, Yi Liusu said, "Mon M Shadow Queen, I am willing to join the Shadow Palace and accept your command." Alright. Yi Weiyang was overjoyed. She looked at Li Qingshan and asked, "What else do you have to say?" Li Qingshan understood that Yi Liusu prioritized the race over everything, so it was not strange at all for her to make a decision like that. However, he still felt slightly disappointed. If that's the case. Chapter 8:16. Oh, when will that be? Yi Weiyang asked. "When I undergo the third heavenly tribulation and gain the right to inherit the position of Shadow Queen," Yi Liusu said calmly. Li Qingshan could not help but laugh aloud. She really was a woman who had followed him for so long. She had her own lofty aspirations. Yi Weiyang said, "What bold words. Do you know how difficult it is to take that step? If you have my assistance, you might have a better chance. Have you been bewitched by this kid as well? Ma am Shadow Queen, do you know just how many hardships we've gone through to get here step by step? If you say we've been bewitched, that's not exactly wrong, but it's more accurate to say that we know how to repay kindness. Over a decade ago, we could only drag out an ignoble existence underground, splitting into 6 clans and killing one another. We were treated as slaves and playthings. Over such a long period of time, none of us even underwent the second heavenly tribulation, yet today, we're able to live peacefully and freely under the great banyan tree, in this blessed land of cultivation. It's all because of him." Yi Liusu gazed at the banyan tree king before withdrawing her gaze and looking at Li Qingshan. Her gaze was sincere. Yi Weiyang frowned. "He's just using you." I hope that's the case as well, but unfortunately, our value to him is very limited. He's always been very busy, so he doesn't have much time to pay attention to us. As a result, most of the time, we just rest and recuperate in the environment he provides. Even now, there's not much we can help him with anymore. Yi Liusu let out a gloomy sigh. Don't you want to return to your clan? I'm your clansman, your senior. Yi Weiyang pressed down on Yi Liusu's shoulder, but both in terms of height and appearance, she seemed a little younger. As the saying goes, it's better to be the head of a chicken than the tail of an ox. I know night roamers should stay together rather than be separated, so I agreed to return to the Shadow Palace and accept Mon M Shadow Queen's leadership. However, the Shadow Palace isn't a peaceful place either. After experiencing so many things, how could I not understand that status is earned through strength? Yi Liusu bowed. Yi Weiyang could tell that Yi Liusu was determined and could not be swayed by words, while Yi Liuxing stood firmly beside Yi Liusu, so she simply abandoned them and arrived on the huge, knotted banyan tree root. She said loudly, I am the master of the Shadow Palace, the king of night roamers. Who is willing to return to the Shadow Palace with me? The night roamers gathered under the tree. When they heard that, they looked at one another, but none of them stepped forward. Regular night roamers admired Yi Liusu very much, and they were reluctant to give up on their current, comfortable lives. As for the night roamers with relatively higher cultivations, they had all experienced the era of internal strife in Cobweb City, so they were doubtful. Yi Weiyang finally realized that this group of night roamers were different from the night roamers she had taken in the past. They were in no hurry to return to their clan. She looked back at Li Qingshan and said, looks like you really treat them well. As you can see. Li Qingshan took a sip of tea with a smile. Yi Weiyang returned to her seat rather gloomily and said to Yi Liusu, Kid, looks like you've made up your mind to stay here. I know that bitch must have passed on many things from the Shadow Palace to you, but do you know that as a man, he can't come into contact with the true core secret techniques? Ghost Shadow, who had been holding his breath the entire time, shuddered. The Shadow Queen was not even willing to mention his name. She clearly resented him very much. If he returned to the Shadow Palace, he would definitely be in for a treat. Please guide me, master. Yi Liusu knelt before Yi Weiyang. Yi Weiyang was amused by this as well. She pointed at her and said, You sure are cunning. You won't listen to me, yet you want to take me as your master. Yi Liusu said, I believe you feel the same way as me. What do I feel? I hope the night roamers can develop and strengthen. I hope I can gaze up at the stars and moon freely and never be oppressed by anyone again. Yi Liusu raised her head and stared straight into Yi Weiyang's eyes. Because it came from the bottom of her heart, she seemed extremely sincere. This was an unyielding ideal that she had experienced countless hardships. Compared to her personal gains and losses, she valued the entire clan more. Even if many clansmen wanted to kill her, she would not change her mind. Yi Weiyang was moved by this too. Some things could not be faked, much less fooling her eyes. Li Qingshan said, Fellow Shadow Queen, there's still night roamers at the end of the day. Don't you dare butt in when we night roamers are talking. Yi Weiyang barked. Unknowingly, her attitude towards Li Qingshan had become much friendlier. Just now, she was filled with killing intent towards Li Qingshan. She even refused to accept the Banyan Tree King's mediation. The most important reason for this was because he had enslaved her clansmen. Now that the misunderstanding had been resolved, she understood that the situation was completely different from what she had imagined it to be. Not only was he not an oppressor, but he was even a liberator and protector from a certain perspectives. I'm an outsider, so it's best if I leave first. Liusu, why don't you have a good chat with this senior of yours? Li Qingshan shrugged with a smile and stood up, pulling Yi Liusu to his seat. It was all thanks to her clever speech that this mediation had succeeded. With how much the Shadow Queen valued her clansmen, she would never give up until she achieved her objective. However, if they submitted to the Shadow Palace so easily, not only would it humiliate him, but it would also touch on many of his secrets. This could be regarded as the best outcome. All right, Qingshan, said Yi Liusu. Li Qingshan was taken aback. He touched her cheek and smiled. Sure enough, you're emboldened by someone's support. I just wanted to ease your mind earlier. Actually, I'm reluctant to let you leave either. He had never cared too much about titles. From a certain perspective, he was actually a person who pursued equality very much. Back in the Clear River Prefecture, even when his cultivation completely surpassed Wasungzan and the others, he did not think of himself as superior. He still behaved normally. However, not everyone in this world could get along with each other like that. There would always be bitches who felt they should be superior to you, and there would always be enemies who needed to speak with their fists. If you did not stomp on their heads, they would not know what you were. Ieyasu's face reddened slightly. She only wanted to prove to the Shadow Queen that their relationship was not as simple as master and servant. She hoped that the Shadow Queen could pass on the secret technique to her without worry. Li Qingshan felt his arm tighten. Little and slender fingers dug deeply into it, so he chuckled and turned around to leave. Ghost Shadow really was like a shadow, drifting behind Li Qingshan. He silently prayed that the Shadow Queen would place all her attention on Ieyasu and the others, so she would not pay attention to his movements. Bitch, stop right there. Yi Weiyang glanced at him and called out. Ghost Shadow stiffened and fell silent out of fear. He turned around and knelt down. Li Qingshan, this bitch is a member of my Shadow Palace. He's been fooling around in the South all these years, yet he's actually known as the greatest assassin of the South. Why doesn't he take a piss and look at himself? How embarrassing. Please remove the blood oath so that he can return to the Shadow Palace with me and continue doing what he should be doing. Although Yi Weiyang was talking to Li Qingshan, her gaze was locked onto Ghost Shadow, like a black leopard eyeing its prey. Women were very vengeful. Chapter 8:17. He's still my third cave master after all. I've already promised so many night roamers to him. Why just leave him here and continue serving me? I believe there will be a day when the blood oath is removed and he can regain his freedom. Having resolved the most fundamental conflict, Li Qingshan's attitude eased up and he smiled. Everything else can be discussed today, but I have to take this bitch away, Yi Weiyang said. Li Qingshan glanced at Ghost Shadow curiously. He had no idea how he had offended the Shadow Queen so deeply. I'm afraid I can't comply with that. If I can't even protect a subordinate, what's the point of being the king of savages? Ghost Shadow cast a grateful gaze at Li Qingshan. From a certain perspective, his objective was the same as Ieyasu's. They both underwent the third heavenly tribulation before returning to the Shadow Palace. Yi Weiyang gradually raised an eyebrow. Her sinister killing intent began to permeate the surroundings. Li Qingshan turned to his side and looked back at her. His smile remained the same, but he showed no intentions of backing down. The atmosphere that had just eased up immediately tensed up again. It made the banyan tree king sigh inside. Ghost Shadow's existence was not particularly important to them, yet they just had to fall into a stalemate for the sake of their pride. Mon am Shadow Queen, can you listen to me on this? Ieyasu interrupted before shooting a glance at Li Qingshan. If they stayed together any longer, they would definitely start arguing again. All right, I'll listen to what you have to say first before I take this bitch away, said Yi Weiyang. A crescent moon silently sank into the western mountains. The first rays of dawn surged in the east. Ghost Shadow followed closely behind Li Qingshan nervously, but in the end, the Shadow Queen did not appear again. Only then did he let out a long sigh of relief and settle down. Ieyasu sat under the great banyan tree. The seat before her was empty. Yi Weiyang had already left Savage Mountain silently. She was still in thought, remaining silent for a very long time. There was a flash before her, and Li Qingshan sat down in front of her. He smiled. How was it? Did you have a pleasant conversation? Ieyasu nodded slightly and suddenly put on a charming smile. Thank you. Li Qingshan stood up and looked to the east. The road ahead is still long. In the myriad poison cult, several hundred fire basins of varying heights burned with gloomy, green flames, dyeing the hall a wretched green. The myriad poison ancestor sat on his throne and felt rather uneasy, so he stood up and paced around the hall. He thought, have I miscalculated something? When the Shadow Empress makes a move, even I don't dare to be negligent, let alone a mere second heavenly tribulation brat. There's only death awaiting him. At this moment, the flames moved without any wind, rising and flickering. The myriad poison ancestor's heart skipped a beat, and he suddenly looked back, only to see that an additional item had appeared on the throne. It was the treasure of the myriad poison cult that he had offered as a reward. His expression changed, and he actually gave up on the assassination. But... He waved his arms and shouted loudly. His wide sleeves fluttered in the wind as a faint green flame ignited. However, there was no answer. Only his voice constantly echoed through the hall. Never did he imagine that the Banyan Tree King would support a human for free, helping him control formations and mediate disputes. However, with the assistance of the Banyan Tree King, Li Qingshan was instead even more at ease in the Mist Province than in the Green Province. Before long, the news of this battle spread across the south very quickly, even reaching the entire Mist Province. The Myriad Poison Cult was a very renowned large sect in the Mist Province, yet they had actually been destroyed by the King of Savages, Li Qingshan, in a single battle. Even the Myriad Poison Ancestor was helpless against him. Everyone found this unbelievable. After hearing Qian Liangmu's report, the King of Southern Yu also became surprised. He held the chess piece between his fingers and forgot to place it down. He said to the Banyan Tree King on the other side of the chessboard, "Sure enough, there's a reason why you've taken a liking to this kid, fellow. It does make my killing intent grow heavier. Let's just focus on harmony." The Banyan Tree King smiled. The King of Southern Yu raised an eyebrow, and the surprise in his eyes deepened. The Banyan Tree King's attitude was even clearer than last time. Last time, he said he was forming a good relationship with him, not exactly protecting him, but now, his intention of protecting him was very strong. It was very worth considering. It had to be mentioned that when the Banyan Tree King agreed to control Savage Mountain's formations and went to great lengths to mediate between him and the Shadow Queen, he was no longer absolutely neutral. Even with his wisdom, it was impossible for him to not have any likes and dislikes, as well as distance between people. When others looked at Li Qingshan, they only treated him as a genius disciple of the Chan Monastery of Devanaga, but in his eyes, he was a supreme prodigy that only appeared once every 1,000 or even 10,000 years among demons, and he had a fortuitous encounter with him. The King of Southern Yu said in amusement, "No wonder this Li Qingshan is bold enough to come to the south and become the next commander. As long as you give the order, who's bold enough to touch a hair on him? Life and death are decreed by fate. Riches and honor are determined by the heavens." The Banyan Tree King expressed his attitude. If the King of Southern Yu really did make up his mind to eliminate Li Qingshan, he would not forcefully stop him. This was what he had to bear when he referred to him as fellow. Aren't people of my generation supposed to defy the heavens and change fate? The King of Southern Yu asked. The Banyan Tree King only smiled. He did not answer. "Li Qingshan, are you bold enough to come out and fight me?" Above Savage Mountain, the Myriad Poison Ancestor rode on a poisonous cloud. His voice boomed like thunder, making no effort to hide the raging fury in his heart. "Myriad Poison, you old coot, how dare you act so recklessly on Savage Mountain? Aren't you afraid I'll wipe out your Myriad Poison cult?" Li Qingshan stood on the top of the mountain and laughed aloud. "Whether you're bold or not, you only need to say the word." The Myriad Poison Ancestor said, "What if I say I'm not bold enough?" Li Qingshan said leisurely, "Then you can drop the title of King of Savages, because you're not worthy." The Myriad Poison Ancestor said, "Someone vaguely told me that too. Hee, whether I'm worthy or not isn't something an old coot like you can decide. If you want me to come out, then I just won't come out," Li Qingshan said. All right. If you're so capable, don't come out for the rest of your life. I'd like to see just how long you can hide for." The Myriad Poison Ancestor pointed at Savage Mountain and said in exasperation. He had truly been angered this time. He was even willing to use such a stupid method to teach Li Qingshan a lesson. "You can stay here for as long as you want. I can't be happier cultivating in my dwelling." Li Qingshan said. The myriad poison ancestor snorted coldly and sat on the cloud. He had made up his mind to go head-to-head with Li Qingshan. If he stays outside Savage Mountain the entire time, the cave masters we let out won't be able to report back, Little and said. Just let them stay outside for a little longer. I'll piss off this old coot first. I obviously won't be hiding the entire time and competing with him in terms of patience. I just happen to want to use him for some practice. Li Qingshan rubbed his hands and said eagerly. Although the lifespans of cultivators were much longer than mortals, their concept of time was not as distinct as mortals either. The higher their cultivation, the more this was the case. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. The myriad poison ancestor had no intentions of leaving. He seemed to be submerged in cultivation, but he had always been paying attention to Savage Mountain below. As soon as Li Qingshan left the formation, he definitely would not be able to escape his senses. Chapter 8:18. However, Li Qingshan was different. He had achieved success as a young man, earning the name of the Wild King in his 30s. Now that he had been sealed up, how could his mind not be affected? He would definitely become restless, which would affect his cultivation. And if he could not hold himself back anymore and dared to come out and fight him, that would be even better. He was confident he only needed a single move to claim his life. The myriad poison ancestor had a plan, so he was in no hurry. He sat on the cloud firmly, like a mountain that weighed down on the sky above Savage Mountain. On this day, clouds stretched for thousands of kilometers, pitch black like ink, weighing down heavily. Thunder rumbled as drizzle drifted with the wind. A storm was about to arrive. Li Qingshan stood on the top of the mountain and raised his head. He could not see the myriad poison ancestor, but he could clearly sense that he was still there. It's about time. During this month, he had spent the entire time cultivating in the Azura field, focusing on the demon suppression statuary. He allowed the viciousness of the tiger demon to surge before converting it into the power of the demon heart, gradually diluting the spiritual chi in the ocean pearl. His demonic chi became purer and purer, vaguely yearning for a battle. I'll watch over you. Little and stood beside Li Qingshan. His clear eyes scanned through the clouds. Li Qingshan planned to temper the tiger demon's fighting spirit in this battle. The chances of him killing the myriad poison ancestor were extremely slim, so there was no need for Little and to take action and expose his trump cards. However, since Little and was watching over him, he obviously had to wait for that tiny chance to appear. With a clang, Li Qingshan immediately demonified. His body was covered in armor, and his appearance underwent many minute changes. He became a little more blood red, and he became even more vicious. With a boom, the rock beneath Li Qingshan's feet collapsed, scattering in all directions. He had already burst out of the clouds, appearing 5 kilometers away. The myriad poison ancestor suddenly opened his eyes, and green light flashed through them. He was pleasantly surprised, but it immediately turned vicious. You really are still young, unable to keep your composure. Allow me to personally crush a genius like you. He stood up resolutely. His green robes ruffled in the fierce wind. His 2 skinny hands danced within his wide sleeves, and the rolling poison gas condensed into a ball of poison wrapped in lightning. Thunder pearl of myriad poisons. Li Qingshan was flying through the clouds, avoiding a purple snake-like thunderbolt. Far and near, the sound of thunder could be heard everywhere. Suddenly, danger loomed over them. A green light descended from the sky, penetrating through the dark clouds, growing brighter and brighter. Boom! A huge hole was blasted open in the thick layer of clouds. Layers upon layers of clouds spread out like the tide. However, the sun still couldn't be seen. The sky was filled with even thicker green clouds. Under the green clouds, the pitch-black demon suppressing tower was in tatters, on the verge of collapse. Li Qingshan summoned the Devil Suppression Pagoda at the critical moment and blocked the attack head-on. As expected of a third heavenly tribulation great cultivator. You're quite powerful. The single eye on his forehead lit up, and a streak of light shot out. Through the green cloud, he saw the myriad poison ancestor sitting on the jade throne. The throne wriggled slightly like jelly. The monsters engraved on it seemed to come alive, opening their mouths together and spitting out thousands of lightning pearls of myriad poison endlessly. They all rained down. The corner of Li Qingshan's lips curled, and he flew up against the wind. With a rattle, 100 chains of demon suppression extended, ripping through the air and lashing out like whips. Boom, 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 boom. The lightning pearls of myriad poison all exploded, and the sky became a terrifying region of lightning. The shockwaves swept across 50 kilometers. Li Qingshan suddenly rushed out of the lightning region. His armor was covered in scars from the lightning strikes, but it forcefully blocked them all. He dove into the green cloud again. Even with the protection of the demon chi, his ears were immediately filled with the sizzling sound of the poison corroding away. Some of the edges and corners were directly ground away, as if they would be completely corroded away if he remained in the poisonous cloud for just a moment longer. Li Qingshan was fearless. The myriad poison ancestor was right in front of him. He swung his right hand backwards, and the demon dragon sword appeared in his hand. Kill. The sword was like a dragon, directly aimed at the myriad poison ancestor's forehead. However, the myriad poison ancestor smiled viciously. A green membrane rose up from the jade throne like a soap bubble, blocking the demon dragon sword. Li Qingshan silently clenched his left hand into a fist. This fatal strike filled with awe-inspiring sword intent was only a probe. As long as he threw the punch at the myriad poison ancestor's old face, he still had a chance. In that moment, little Anne's figure vaguely appeared above the poisonous cloud. Her seaweed-like hair drifted, but her clear eyes had already become an almost transparent white flame. The Buddha-slaying sword was in her hand too. But suddenly, a sense of danger rose up in her heart. Before she knew it, the myriad poison ancestor had held a green, poisonous tumor in his hand, nurturing it silently for quite some time. It was the protective treasure of the myriad poison cult. It shot out with a streak of pale green lights. Li Qingshan blocked it with his sword, but he did not feel any resistance at all. However, the demon dragon sword produced a sorrowful cry. The green light dyed the edge of the sword and passed through the hilt, dyeing his right hand. Immediately, the armor on his right hand shattered, and his right arm went numb, spreading towards his body inch by inch. With a clang, the demon dragon sword shattered, dispersing into thousands of pieces. Li Qingshan could clearly sense that if it were not for the fact that he practiced the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine, which made his body as tough as a demon king's, he would have been smashed to pieces. Die. Seeing how Li Qingshan was actually unscathed, the myriad poison ancestor was taken aback. He leapt to his feet and swung his hand, throwing a palm strike towards Li Qingshan's chest. Li Qingshan was overjoyed. Wasn't this exactly the opportunity he had been waiting for? Cold light flashed through his eyes, and a wisp of fire-like hair emerged from behind the armor. He let out a deafening moo, and the figure of the ox demon appeared behind him, heading towards the myriad poison ancestor. He had thrown a punch. The myriad poison ancestor suddenly felt uneasy, but he was unable to figure out what had gone wrong. With Li Qingshan's cultivation, he had a 30% chance of surviving if he fled, but clashing head-on with him was clearly courting death. It was already too late for him to change his move now. The fist and palm collided. Time seemed to freeze in that moment. Li Qingshan's fist rapidly corroded, revealing the bones in the blink of an eye. Its flickering metallic luster dimmed from the corrosion as well. However, as the poison flowed, he smiled. However, the myriad poison ancestor was in disbelief. His skinny arm rapidly twisted and deformed, exploding into a mist of blood with a bang like a piece of wood that had been snapped. He was a great cultivator of the third heavenly tribulation, but he was not particularly powerful. Against Li Qingshan, who could rival corpse kings, how could he withstand the great strength of a demon king, let alone the unstoppable power of tremors? Li Qingshan played him viciously from the front, causing him to fall heavily into the jade throne. Li Qingshan's scarlet eyes clearly reflected the myriad poison ancestor's shocked expression, as well as a ghostly figure. He stepped on the green bubble conjured by the jade throne, sinking in deeply. He raised his arms high into the air and crossed his fists, throwing them down with a roar. Even a mountain would be smashed to pieces. Boom! The green clouds dispersed, revealing the azure sky. The green bubble twisted and surged violently. Against Li Qingshan's powerful strike, it actually did not shatter and even showed signs of recovering. Its defense was as tough as it could get. It was basically undefeatable. The myriad poison ancestor raised his head and gazed at Li Qingshan. His armor had all been corroded away, revealing his sturdy body. He had a devilishly handsome face, and his unbridled, insolent smile revealed his sharp fangs. The pair of ox horns on his head were like crescent moons, about to pierce the sky. Just who is this kid? The myriad poison ancestor considered retreating. A sword protruded from his chest, and the Buddha-slaying sword pierced the green bubble, passing through the back of the jade throne and his back. Behind the green jade throne, there was a white skeleton surrounded by rolling flames. With her here, he would never be alone. The myriad poison ancestor widened his eyes, which were completely bloodshot. The Buddha-slaying sword definitely was not just tough and sharp. It was currently destroying his mind, igniting his flesh and blood, and devouring his soul. Li Qingshan did not waste any more words. He planted his feet on the left and right armrests of the jade throne and grabbed the myriad poison ancestor's head, throwing another punch. Little and swung the Buddha-slaying sword, and the samadhi flames of white bone surged out, enveloping the myriad poison ancestor. His white bone claws reached towards the back of the myriad poison ancestor's head. The green, poisonous tumor in the myriad poison ancestor's hand suddenly swelled, beating like a heart. With each beat, it would expand to 10 times its original size, revealing green veins and vessels. The myriad poison ancestor produced an inhuman roar, "Die! Retreat!" Li Qingshan's eyes narrowed. He forcefully pulled back his fist, and his phoenix wings flapped violently as he retreated in a hurry. Little and pulled back his sword and turned around, but he was already a step too late. The green, poisonous tumor turned into a green sun. Thousands of rays of miserable green light shot out, eclipsing the white sun above and swallowing them. The green light landed on a mountain peak in the distance. The mountain peak collapsed silently, landing in the dense forest below. Whether it was the trees or rocks, they were all reduced to dust, immediately forming a pit of white sand. The light dispersed. Most of Li Qingshan's flesh and blood had vanished, as if invisible insects had gnawed away at it, revealing his craggy bones. They no longer shone with a metallic luster, becoming extremely fragile. Little An's white bones had also been dyed with a rust-like color. He arrived beside Li Qingshan. "Are you all right?" "I won't die. That old bastard ran away," Li Qingshan said. As they spoke, Little An used the samadhi flames of white bone to suppress the spreading rust. Li Qingshan also used the spirit turtle's method of sea suppression to suppress the poison that had infected him. Even though they had grasped the opportunity, killing a third heavenly tribulation great cultivator was not that easy. The brief delay was enough for the myriad poison ancestor to flee back to the myriad poison cult. The formations of the myriad poison cult were on Savage Mountain, and the myriad poison ancestor personally presided over them. Although he was not as powerful as the Banyan Tree King, he could still unleash enough power. Even if the two of them were unscathed, they would struggle to break through. "We've used all of our trump cards this time, but he still managed to escape. It'll probably be troublesome from now on. The hunting dogs have already been mobilized. They might be able to keep him busy for a while," said Little Ann. "The hunting dogs?" Li Qingshan suddenly understood. He smiled. "You sure are thorough." The Azura commander Yin Qing flew off, constantly flickering in and out of existence. She followed the streak of green light closely, searching for an opportunity and ready to strike at any time. When Li Qingshan fought, Little and had given her the mission. She had been observing the battle from the mountain peak the entire time. When the myriad poison ancestor detonated the cult treasure and fled Savage Mountain, she immediately set off. She only had a single mission: to keep the myriad poison ancestor busy. Chapter 8:19. Thousands of kilometers away, the myriad poison ancestor flew through the air. His face still twitched. Apart from his anger and humiliation, he was mostly filled with lingering fear. He had almost failed miserably on this trip to Savage Mountain. After blowing up the cancer, he wanted to use this opportunity to kill the two of them, but in the end, his cautious side still won him the upper hand. In other words, he could no longer ignore the sense of danger in his heart. He felt like ensuring his own safety was more important, so he flew towards the myriad poison cult without even looking back. Suddenly, his heart skipped a beat. Looking back, he saw a blood shadow tailing behind him, constantly flickering and growing closer and closer. He bellowed, "Don't you dare, you scoundrel!" That bellow demonstrated his tremendous bearing as a great cultivator, enough to split a river with his shout. He did not weaken at all. If regular cultivators heard it, they would definitely shudder in fear. Those with slightly weaker cultivations might even develop inner demons from fright, or even their souls might disperse. However, the corner of Yin Qing's lips curled up. A defeated general was nothing to brag about. She had still overestimated this old man by comparing him to an Azura king. She had gone through bloody battles of life and death in the Azura realm, so how could she be frightened by a disturbance like that? Instead, it only made him even more cowardly on the inside. With a wave of her hand, the circular blade spun out, directly piercing through space and arriving before the myriad poison ancestor. The myriad poison ancestor sent the circular blade flying with a furious palm strike, but he could not help but falter. Yin Qing suddenly appeared above his head, and like a blade, she plunged her fingers towards the top of his head. Just now, Li Qingshan had grabbed the myriad poison ancestor's head and beaten it to death. He had already viewed it as the greatest humiliation of his life, so how could he let his head be touched again? With a flick of his sleeve, poisonous gas surged out and forced Yin Qing back. A withered hand was hidden inside, ready to strike like a venomous snake. Suddenly, it discovered an opening and reached towards Yin Qing's neck like a loosed arrow. Yin Qing vanished, hiding in space before shifting several dozen meters away, making the myriad poison ancestor's fatal strike miss. However, her body had been eaten away by the poisonous gas. There were some places where the flesh beneath her skin was directly exposed. She had gone from an enchanting beauty to an extremely hideous one. She did not care at all, and instead calmed down. This old man's poison is indeed fierce, but it's not fatal to me. This way I can drag it out. With the Azura's immortal body, even Li Qingshan wouldn't dare to say that he could kill her with a single punch. The myriad poison ancestor sensed an ill omen. At the same time, on Savage Mountain, Li Qingshan gulped down the sap he had obtained from the Banyan Tree King. At the same time, he used the moonlight reflection to draw out the spiritual energy from the water god seal in the Cloud Dream Marsh to slowly recover his demon chi. His flesh grew back strand by strand. On the other hand, Little and brandished the blood sea banner. A blood dragon flew out and coiled around him, cleansing his white skeleton, diluting the poison before using the samadhi flames of white bone to cleanse it. If regular cultivators were poisoned by the myriad poison ancestor, they would be in huge trouble. If they could not find the antidote, they might have to contend with the poison for the rest of their lives, and they would probably be doomed in the end. As a result, even great cultivators with cultivations no lower than his had to be extremely cautious when they clashed with him. Unless they had no other choice, they would never want to become enemies with him. This was the reason why the myriad poison ancestor could dominate the south. However, Li Qingshan and Little and practiced a wondrous technique that far surpassed this world, which allowed them to forge extremely tough bodies. They were not afraid of being poisoned to death. However, the poison was extremely stubborn and violent, so they could only suppress it for now. Completely purging it would still take a very long time. Li Qingshan did not wait for his wounds to recover completely. He had just recovered some strength when many parts of his body were still jagged. Suddenly he unfurled his phoenix wings and wrapped a hand around Little, and fierce winds surged and flames raged, constantly accumulating power. Right when he was about to set off, he suddenly heard a familiar voice. Looking back, he saw Ru Exin waving at him from the top of the mountain. Have a safe journey. Remember to write back. Fuck you. Li Qingshan scolded in a joking manner. He suddenly unleashed his power, leaving behind 2 long streaks of light behind him. He had already whistled through the air, pursuing the myriad poison ancestor. Bitch, you're an Azura? Why did you listen to Li Qingshan and infiltrate the myriad poison cult to kill people? Wasn't it you? The myriad poison ancestor barked. He had clashed with Yin Qing several times, so he could not help but sigh in amazement at the ingenuity of her teleportation. However, it made him remember something. Just who was responsible for the massacre of the myriad poison cult? Originally, he thought it was Ghost Shadow, but let alone whether he possessed the ability to pass through formations or not, even if he did, he would only be able to kill regular disciples at most. Protectors and elders would never be killed so easily. He suddenly found the answer to the question that had been plaguing him the entire time. This woman, this Azura, has that kind of strength. Do you like the view on the square? And those words on the screen wall? They're pretty, aren't they? I've written them very diligently. After all, it's been so many years since I last wrote one. Yin Qing smiled. Her figure flickered in and out of existence. Although she had been avoiding an open clash with the myriad poison ancestor the entire time, her situation was not optimistic either. Half of her right arm had been eaten away, and due to the effects of the poison, it was unable to recover. Her other injuries were even more numerous. In order to keep the myriad poison ancestor busy, she had paid quite the price. But even with that being the case, her sharpness did not diminish at all. This was the battle heart of an Azura that she had forged through the years. It really is you. The myriad poison ancestor flew into a rage. Li Qingshan had wiped out the entire myriad poison cult, and it was all because something had happened in the cult. He had been drawn back to the myriad poison ancestor. Now that he saw the culprit behind all of this, how could he not grit his teeth in hatred? He regretted underestimating Li Qingshan once again. Originally, he thought he was just a junior, but never did he expect him to possess such strength, where he could even order around an Azura commander. If it's me, what are you going to do? Yin Qing did not seem to care at all, but she appeared several hundred meters away in a flash, pulling away from the myriad poison ancestor slightly. She thought, who knows what other killer moves this old man has yet to unleash? I better be careful and not give him an opportunity, or my life really will be in danger. The myriad poison ancestor said sinisterly, you want to keep me busy so that Li Qingshan can hurry over, but little do you know that he's been poisoned by me. He's already struggling to protect himself right now, so how can he still care about you? I must kill you today. With that, he suddenly raised his hands high into the air. Myriad poison burial. However, he coughed up a mouthful of blood first. This was a secret technique of the myriad poison cult. Even when his body was unaffected, he would still have to endure some pressure, let alone when he was heavily injured right now. He would be harming himself before harming the enemy. However, for the sake of revenge, he could not care so much anymore. More importantly, he did not wish for an assassin like this to come and go as she pleased while he was recovering in the myriad poison cult, threatening him at any time. The poison on Yin Qing erupted with 10 times, 100 times more intensity. Her eyes became covered with green veins, shriveling up in the blink of an eye. Her ears, eyes, mouth, and nose that she had been carefully protecting the entire time immediately became useless. She could no longer see, hear, or smell anything. She was alarmed, but she did not panic. She immediately used a spatial movement technique and hid in space. However, the poison spread madly. If this continued, she definitely could not last for much longer. The myriad poison ancestor did not move at all. He maintained his posture of raising his hands high into the air, circulating his powers at full strength. Blood constantly oozed out of his mouth, but the corner of his lips curled into a cruel, vengeful smile. He did not need to take too long. He only needed to last for a while, and she would die from the poison. Then he would return to the myriad poison cult to recover and take revenge on Li Qingshan. This time, even if he had to cast aside his pride and beg the honored guest he was on good terms with, he would still kill Li Qingshan no matter what. But in reality, There was a thought that even he was reluctant to admit. Compared to revenge, it was better described as self-protection. The battle had scared him. If he allowed Li Qingshan and Little and to continue cultivating, regardless of which one of them underwent the third heavenly tribulation, it would be his death. Blood sprayed from the myriad poison ancestor's mouth violently. Suddenly, he looked back at the horizon and saw a streak of fire fly over. Li Qingshan saw the myriad poison ancestor from afar. Before he could even celebrate, he felt the poison he had suppressed after so much suddenly erupt violently, corroding his body and even his soul wildly. He could not help but be surprised. This old bastard still has something like that? Though, it seems like he can't move when he uses this move. If I make him sit on the jade throne and use it calmly, it'll really be troublesome. Unbeknownst to Li Qingshan, that was what the myriad poison ancestor originally planned to do, but unfortunately, he did not even have the opportunity to use it before his defenses were breached and he was forced into dire straits. After being heavily injured, he became even more afraid of using it carelessly. With what Li Qingshan was capable of, he could kill the myriad poison ancestor in a single punch before he could even die from the poison. At this moment, Li Qingshan and Little and were basically innocent bystanders, but unknowingly, they had helped Yin Qing shoulder a lot of the pressure. The myriad poison ancestor, on the other hand, felt the pressure multiply. The more poison he detonated, the more pressure he had to endure. His wounds worsened even further. Although he was tempted to throw his life at Li Qingshan or focus his attention and kill the Azura with poison first, he saw how Li Qingshan paused before charging over again. Although he was much slower now, it would not take long either. He immediately paled in shock. He was no longer bold enough to persist any longer, dispelling the technique in a hurry and flying away. Yin Qing used the last bit of her strength to leap out of the space there. She could not hold on any longer and fell down. Li Qingshan caught her and said, "Thank you for your trouble." He sent her back into the Azura field before handing the Azura field to Little Anne. He told her, "Take her back to Savage Mountain to cure her of the poison." Little Anne hesitated before nodding. She had also been affected by the myriad poison ancestor's myriad poison burial. The poison had flared up again, so she did not have as great a recovery rate as Li Qingshan. If she persisted in the pursuit, it would probably cause even greater damage to her body of white bones that she had refined after so much difficulty. Li Qingshan flew off as his scarlet eyes locked onto the speck of green light. He only had a single thought in his head, which was to prevent the myriad poison ancestor from fleeing back to the myriad poison cult safely. In the sky, a streak of green light was in front and a streak of scarlet light was in close pursuit. They moved with lightning speed, covering 1,000 kilometers in the blink of an eye. Both of them were fighting with their lives on the line. The myriad poison ancestor's wounds worsened, so he was nowhere close to his peak condition. Li Qingshan was quite injured too, and he was poisoned, but he possessed a fierce fighting spirit that only grew stronger as the battle progressed. He circulated his demon core and flapped his wings, rapidly closing the distance between them. A while later, the tip of the scarlet light had basically touched the tail of the green light. They were less than 5 kilometers apart. Chapter 8:20. The myriad poison ancestor ravished with joy. He glanced back, but his pursuer was nowhere to be seen. It was Qingshan. He was clearly a demon with scarlet eyes, fire-like hair, ox horns, and a tiger's tail. His murderousness and malice combined into demon qi, surging into the air and pressing over. Without the demonic armor's concealment, everything seemed extremely clear. The myriad poison ancestor wondered, the Chan monastery of Devanaga is an orthodox school of Buddhism, so why would they accept a demon as a disciple? And that Little and definitely isn't human either, which is why he can resist my poison. He could vaguely make out the 2 words, North Moon, engraved on the ox horns. Suddenly he recalled an incident from several years ago. Back then, it had spread like wildfire among the upper echelon of the Mist Province's cultivation community. The Dragon King of the Sea of the Green Province had suddenly entered the territory of the Mist Province. Originally, They thought he had some sort of dispute with the Banyan Tree King, but only afterwards did they find out he was hunting down a demon. The demon's name seemed to be North Moon. The myriad poison cult rapidly drew closer and larger, about to arrive in a moment. The myriad poison ancestor no longer had any qualms. He swung his sleeves backwards, and with a great boom, a ring of green light exploded. Li Qingshan's eyes narrowed, reflecting the green light. At such a distance and with such speed, it was impossible for him to dodge in time. He bellowed out and smashed through the green light with a punch, but he could not help but slow down. However, the myriad poison ancestor used the recoil to move even faster, immediately pulling away from Li Qingshan. He did not forget to leave behind a vicious threat filled with resentment. Li Qingshan, I will never forget today's grievance. I will definitely repay you generously. You better survive today first. Li Qingshan extended his hand towards the myriad poison ancestor from afar and pressed down. The ox demon's gravity. The myriad poison ancestor immediately felt his body become 100 times heavier. Suddenly he plummeted down, colliding against a mountain on the ground. He adjusted his body in a hurry and shot past the top of the mountain, creating a gully. What move is this? Li Qingshan raised his hand, and the myriad poison ancestor immediately became as light as a feather. Not only did the gravity completely vanish, but it even produced a repulsive force instead. He suddenly drifted upwards, rushing towards the horizon. While flying at full speed, it was extremely difficult to control his body. Moreover, he was seriously injured. His body suddenly undulated as he moved, slowing down a lot. However, while he was in a horrible shape, he still flew towards the myriad poison cult at the end of the day. The gravity of the earth was unable to cause him any actual harm, and Li Qingshan had to split his attention to use his innate ability, so his speed was affected too. If this continued, the myriad poison ancestor would escape, so he frowned too. Could it be that I have to let him escape this calamity? What should I do? It's a pity that although this gravity field is not useless, it can only distract the enemy. It would be great if it could lure him to me. Li Qingshan's eyes suddenly lit up as he understood something. In the past, he had complained that the ox demon trample was useless and difficult to use, but now, it was his most powerful innate divine ability. No matter who the enemy was, he only needed to throw a punch. Could the third innate ability of the ox demon really only be used as an assistant and to distract the enemy? Li Qingshan paused and stopped flapping the phoenix wings. Seeing this, the myriad poison ancestor felt extremely regretful. This kid sure is decisive. He's flexible with his actions. If he's bold enough to chase me to the vicinity of the myriad poison cult, I can activate the formation and heavily injure him. I didn't think he'd actually give up. Li Qingshan's body tensed up, becoming as firm as a mountain and as steady as the earth. However, he gave up on the pursuit and used an innate ability that did not possess any offensive power at all. The strength of the earth. As long as he was on the ground, the second innate ability of the ox demon could provide him with endless power and make his strength even greater. A large part of the ox demon's great strength relied on this innate ability. However, because this innate ability was not visible, it often gave people the false impression that it had never been used before. It did adhere to the ox demon's lineage, which was discreet and profound. As a matter of fact, Li Qingshan would sometimes overlook the assistance this innate ability could provide him. With the imperial heaven above and the earth below, they ruled over everything. The imperial heaven was supreme. The sun and moon shone brightly, and the stars were far away. They were like the father of all life. Lightning, rain, and dew were all his benevolence. The earth below was vast, and the mountains stretched on endlessly. She was like the mother of all life, nourishing all life with great virtue. All life revered the imperial heaven, and cultivators pursued the heavenly weights painstakingly. Who cared about the earth beneath their feet? They called it the earthly way. As a result, Li Qingshan spread his arms. I am the child of the earth. The myriad poison cult was right in front of him. The myriad poison ancestor only needed a few seconds to arrive. while he had already pulled an extremely great distance away from Li Qingshan. No matter what he was capable of, it would all be useless. He could finally rest and heal in peace before thinking about a plan for revenge. His instincts told him that he could make use of his identity as the North Moon. Perhaps he could destroy Li Qingshan's reputation and crush him to smithereens without even shedding a single drop of blood. As he thought, he suddenly halted, but after a few ups and downs he was already prepared. He would not be affected so easily anymore. But this time, he discovered that the invisible power did not make him fall down. Instead, it pulled him backwards. Li Qingshan used the gravity of the earth again, but he used the strength of the earth to change the direction of gravity and pull the myriad poison ancestor towards him. He did not move at all. Even his murderousness had thinned out, replaced by a vast and heavy aura. He unleashed the strength of the ox demon. The power was invisible and intangible, but it could not be cut off or severed, gripping the myriad poison ancestor firmly. In shock, he discovered that not only did his speed become slower and slower, but he actually came to a halt in the end against his will, gradually drawing closer to Li Qingshan. The myriad poison ancestor's expression changed in shock. He let out a hoarse roar, desperately wrestling with the power. If he were in peak condition, he could probably put up a fight, but he was heavily injured right now. In order to pull away from Li Qingshan, he was even willing to worsen his wounds. He was already at the end of his tether. Li Qingshan was rather injured too, but the strength of the earth was something he could unleash at full strength no matter what state he was in, even if he was heavily injured or on the brink of death. If he wrestled with someone using the earth as his foundation, he was confident that he would never lose, no matter what form it was. The myriad poison ancestor watched helplessly as the myriad poison cult grew further and further away, while Li Qingshan drew closer and closer. Finally, he began to panic. Li Qingshan, you really are going to fight me to the death. I'm an honored guest of the King of Southern Yu's estate. If you kill me, the King of Southern Yu will never spare you. Li Qingshan's expression was determined. He said nothing, possessing a tenacity that would never stop until he achieved his objective. No matter how the myriad poison ancestor threatened, scared, tempted, or begged for mercy, he remained unfazed. I'm going to kill you today. 5 kilometers, 5 kilometers, a kilometer, 300 meters, 30 meters, 3 meters, die. Li Qingshan let out an extremely delighted roar and threw a punch at the myriad poison ancestor's old face. Chapter 8:21. The power of tremors spread through the myriad poison ancestor's entire body. Cracks covered him like a spider's web, and he collapsed silently. Suddenly, a streak of green light shot towards Li Qingshan's forehead. It moved several times faster than the myriad poison ancestor when he was in peak condition, and under the pull of the gravity of the earth right now, it was even faster than before. Even Li Qingshan could not respond in time. He caught a glimpse of it and saw that the green light was a fist-sized infant. It was half-transparent and resembled the myriad poison ancestor slightly. Its face was filled with resentment. A soul nascence. After undergoing the third heavenly tribulation, human cultivators would convert their golden core into a soul nascence, condensing their cultivation within their soul. Even if their body was destroyed, it would not be life-threatening. All they had to do was find a new body, and they could possess it and be reborn. Existences at the third heavenly tribulation were very difficult to kill. Demon kings were because of their tough bodies and startling life force. As for human cultivators, they relied on the mysteries of soul nascence. If they chose to flee, they would be extremely difficult to capture, and at certain times, they even possessed the power to reverse life and death. The myriad poison ancestor had launched a counterattack at a critical moment. This was the first time Li Qingshan had seen a soul nascence either. Let alone being unprepared, even if he had been prepared, he would not have been able to respond in time. With a flash of green light, the myriad poison ancestor's soul nascence vanished. Li Qingshan froze, maintaining his posture of swinging his fist. Even the delight on his face had not been completely erased. Li Qingshan, oh Li Qingshan. If I didn't have any way of fighting back, wouldn't I have blown up my soul nascence immediately and taken you down with me? I didn't want to use this move originally, but you've gone too far. Now, I'll make you understand the difference between us. Green light illuminated Li Qingshan's sea of consciousness. The myriad poison ancestor's soul nascence descended with the might of a sovereign. It was both delighted from turning the tables, but it was also filled with resentment and reluctance. Although a destroyed body could be reborn through possession, the price they had to pay would be extremely great too. As a result, no great cultivator would choose this path unless they had no other choice. The myriad poison ancestor had also been forced into dire straits, putting up a desperate struggle. He was confident that he had the situation under control. No matter how many magical abilities Li Qingshan had, it would be difficult for him to use them in his knowledge sea. No matter how strong his body was, there was still a qualitative difference between a mere spirit and his nascent souls. Although this was Li Qingshan's home ground, in this confrontation of the sea of consciousness, he undoubtedly had the absolute advantage. What was left to do was to completely crush Li Qingshan's thoughts and then completely occupy this body. Although I've condensed a nascent soul, I've been stuck at the early stage, unable to make a breakthrough. Originally, I had no hope of breaking through to the fourth heavenly tribulation. This body is as strong as a demon king's. It will definitely increase my strength greatly. Even if there are some conflicts and discomfort, it won't be too much of a loss. Li Qingshan, all your hard work has gone to me. But before that, he wanted to listen to Li Qingshan's cries for mercy and enjoy the pleasure of revenge. If you beg me and listen to my instructions, this old man can consider sparing your life. The myriad poison ancestor sent out a thought, but the green light from the nascent soul became even more dazzling, contaminating Li Qingshan's knowledge sea like poison. Demon suppression. Li Qingshan bellowed out inside, and it exploded in his knowledge sea like thunder. The demon suppression statuary's primary purpose was to suppress the demonic nature within oneself, and only then did it suppress the demonic path in the outside world. In that moment, the inside and the outside had become one. The strength of Li Qingshan's demonic nature went without saying. The myriad poison ancestor was a powerful figure of the demonic path too. The demon suppression tower appeared in the sea of consciousness, as large as a mountain. It crushed down viciously towards the myriad poison ancestor's nascent soul. With a boom, the green light vanished. The myriad poison ancestor's nascent soul was suppressed beneath the tower. Chains of demon suppression as thick as dragons crisscrossed, locking the demon suppression tower firmly. If you beg me, I might even spare your life. Li Qingshan's voice rang out in his knowledge sea. Even he had never expected the demon suppression statuary to be so powerful. It truly was a special cultivation method of the Chan monastery of Devanaga after all. Child's play. In the demon suppression tower, the myriad poison ancestor bellowed out. Immediately, the pitch-black demon suppression tower was dyed green, shining with green light. Oh no! Li Qingshan visualized the demon suppression statues and used the demon suppression statuary as hard as he could, pouring all the remaining demonic energy in his demon heart into the demon suppression tower to contend against the myriad poison ancestor's nascent soul. However, the demon suppression tower shook violently, and the green light grew brighter and brighter. Li Qingshan realized he had still underestimated the power of a nascent soul. He watched helplessly as the chains of demon suppression snapped one by one. With a great rumble, the myriad poison ancestor's nascent soul burst out of the tower, shining with blinding lights. His knowledge sea surged violently, as if a green sun had risen up from the ocean. With a kacha sound, a tiny crack appeared on the demon heart, and it became dim and lightless. Li Qingshan knew he could not even use the demon suppression statuary in a short amount of time, let alone summoning the demon suppression tower. You're just putting up a desperate struggle. You overestimate yourself. I'd like to see what else you've got. The myriad poison ancestor said. He felt like he had everything under control. He was prepared to viciously torture Li Qingshan's soul, releasing all of the resentment from the sneak attack and pursuit. Before he had even finished speaking, Li Qingshan said calmly, The spirit turtle suppresses the seas. The spirit turtle manifested and descended from above. Compared to the demon suppression tower, the spirit turtle did not possess much might. Not only was it much smaller than the demon suppression tower, but it descended very slowly too. It shone with a faint glow as it descended slowly at a steady pace. However, wherever the light shone, the churning sea of consciousness calmed down. The green light seemed to freeze too, losing its original might. What? The myriad poison ancestor paled in fright. There were not a lot of cultivators who specially practiced techniques for battles in the sea of consciousness. Normally, at a time like this, it would be a clash of the strength of their souls and consciousnesses, let alone demons. The strength of the demon suppression tower that Li Qingshan had summoned had already left the myriad poison ancestor extremely surprised. He never thought he would have an even stronger move. Heh, you want to fight me? Let's see who's the one putting up a desperate struggle and overestimating themselves. Li Qingshan sniggered. As someone who practiced the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine, he did not have any shortcomings. He was flawless both inside and out. Whether it was a clash of techniques, melee combat, or a clash of consciousnesses, he had a set of methods to deal with them all. When the myriad poison ancestor smashed through the demon suppression tower, he seemed unstoppable, but he had actually exhausted quite a lot of his strength. His soul nascence was no longer as bright as it was in the beginning, shrouded in a layer of dullness. Although he resisted as hard as he could, the spirit turtle suppresses the seas was far more powerful than the demon suppression statuary. The spirit turtle pressed down on the green light inch by inch. It seemed slow, but it was unquestionable, all the way until it reached the top of the soul nascence's head. As it turned out, only 3 inches of green light remained, but it was extremely condensed as well. They entered a stalemate for a moment. However, Li Qingshan had the water god's seal to replenish him, while the myriad poison ancestor was alone and helpless. Before long, only 2 inches of green light remained. The outcome had already been determined. Chapter 8:22. The figure of the spirit turtle hovered above the myriad poison ancestor's head, no longer pressing down. However, it continued to shine. Li Qingshan definitely did not believe the myriad poison ancestor did not have the determination to fight to the death. Most importantly, the spirit turtle's suppression could not be completed in a single moment. It was enough for him to consider. If the soul nascence exploded in his sea of consciousness, he would definitely be smashed to pieces. No matter how tough his body was, no matter how startling his regenerative powers were, he would not be able to escape death. Li Qingshan could not help but sigh. This myriad poison ancestor sure was difficult to deal with. He had succeeded in launching a sneak attack while he was off guard, and then he made the Azura assassin Yin Qing keep him busy while he hunted him down. In this battle, Little and had basically lost his battle prowess. Yin Qing was heavily injured and on the brink of death, yet he had almost managed to escape. He had finally broken through after so much difficulty and thought he could finally kill him, but he still ended up in a stalemate in the end. Hurry up and stow this turtle away, or I'll take you down with me. The myriad poison ancestor's soul nascence clenched its fist, filled with viciousness and determination. Li Qingshan did not stow the spirit turtle away. Instead, he smiled. Myriad poison, you've cultivated arduously for 1,000 years, and you've only undergone the 3rd heavenly tribulation after so much difficulty and condensed a soul nascence, yet you keep mentioning taking me down with you at the drop of a hat. Who do you think you're trying to scare? Even though he was not bold enough to force the myriad poison ancestor into dire straits, he was underestimating Li Qingshan's courage if he thought he could do whatever he wanted just because he said he would take him down with him. He believed that as long as the myriad poison ancestor had a sliver of hope, he would not choose such a terrible plan. If it was an ordinary cultivator who had fallen to this state, they might have thrown caution to the wind in despair. But a great cultivator, although they had the same emotions as mortals and would be affected by emotions, they would not lose their rationality in the most fundamental aspect of their temperament. I've already lived enough. You're in the prime of your life, Yet you're already capable of something like this at such a young age. Even the princes of the Dragon Province can't match you. My life hasn't been lived in vain if an old coot with no future like me can end a genius like you." The myriad poison ancestor was in dire straits, but he instead recovered some of his bearing and said slowly, "You're flattering me. I'm just a young kid, how can I be compared to you?" The two of them spoke one after another. One said that the other had a profound cultivation and that it was not easy to cultivate. The other praised the other for his talent and boundless future. If others were to hear this, they would think that they were courting each other. At this time, whoever cherished his own life more would be under the control of others. I've heard that soul nascence is extremely profound. As long as you find a suitable body, it won't affect your cultivation apart from wasting some time. Li Qingshan gave the myriad poison ancestor some hope. Alas, this old man has failed miserably and fallen into a hopeless situation. How can I dare to think about the future? I might as well give up. The myriad poison ancestor sighed, and his soul nascence suddenly began to tremble. A terrifying power that could destroy everything was about to be unleashed. "What do you want?" Li Qingshan asked calmly. He arrived high up in the atmospheric winds and flapped his wings of wind, flying in the direction of Savage Mountain. Then he tossed the 2 Sumeru rings into the water mirror's image, teleporting them to his clone in the marsh of Cloud Dream. These were his and the myriad poison ancestors' Sumeru rings respectively. He prepared for the worst-case scenario as he racked his brain to come up with a plan. If the demon core escaped far enough away, then even if the myriad poison ancestor blew up his soul nascence, he could maintain a ray of light and be reborn. This could be regarded as his final trump card. However, once the demon core left, his strength would weaken drastically, and he would immediately lose control over the myriad poison ancestor's soul nascence, giving him the opportunity to escape instead. As a result, he needed to use the water mirror's image to teleport the demon core to his clone the moment the myriad poison ancestor blew himself up. This timing was far too difficult to grasp. If he escaped too early, the myriad poison ancestor would stop blowing himself up, but if he escaped too late, the demon core would be sucked into the explosion. How could he still have the opportunity to undergo rebirth? Even if he used the spirit turtle's divination abilities to grasp the timing, rebirth would still take him many years to recover. When he turned into a phoenix's embryo, he could not even maintain a basic level of consciousness. It could be described as the worst possible plan. However, a worst possible plan was still a plan. It was better than having no plan at all. Li Qingshan made up his mind. At most, I'll just risk rebirth again. Who's afraid of who? Send me back to the myriad poison cult, and we'll mind our own business from here on out. The myriad poison ancestor stated his conditions. Heh, you sure can dream on. If I go back to the myriad poison cult, you'll probably activate the formations and trap me the moment you emerge. Li Qingshan stalled for time as he sped up. As long as he returned to Savage Mountain, he could get Little N's clever brain to come up with a solution, not to mention the fact that he had the Banyan Tree King, whose wisdom was as deep as the ocean. I won't make things difficult for you. There's no need for me to go to the myriad poison cult. I just need to be at the edge of the myriad poison cult. Remove this turtle and let me sense the outside world and I'll leave, said the myriad poison ancestor. Li Qingshan fell silent. Only when the myriad poison ancestor pressed him did he say, "Since you already know my identity, you'll definitely make it public when you get back. If the Dragon King of the Sea comes knocking, I won't be able to deal with him." The myriad poison ancestor happened to be planning this. Originally, he planned on feigning ignorance about the matter between the North Moon and the Dragon King of the Sea, but now that he had been exposed, there was nothing he could do. He answered with a question, "What do you want? Do you really want me to die with you?" As he said that, he assumed a posture like he was about to blow up his soul nascence again. "If that's what you want, then do as you please. Even the Dragon King of the Sea couldn't kill me in the past, so you won't be any different." Li Qingshan said coldly. All right. Then I'll try and see if I can drag you down with me," said the myriad poison ancestor. All of his accumulated resentment seemed to erupt, making him rather hysterical. The green light in the core of the soul nascence grew brighter and brighter. Li Qingshan tensed up and immediately stopped flying. A piece of the spirit turtle's profound shell flew out before him. It was as bright as a mirror, but it reflected the situation in Cloud Dream Marsh almost 50,000 kilometers away. He spat out the demon core, which stopped on the edge of the mirror. But a while later, when he saw how Li Qingshan did not respond at all, the soul nascence on the verge of erupting settled down again. The myriad poison ancestor said viciously, "Kid, you sure are something. Just let me stay in your sea of consciousness the entire time. I'd like to see how you cultivate." The older people got, the more they cherished their lives. They lacked the bravery and vigor of young people. They had gone through so much to reach their current level of cultivation. Unless they had no other choice, they would never choose the path of mutual destruction no matter what. And the fact that Li Qingshan had managed to escape from the Dragon King of the Sea did indeed make him fearful. If he threw his life on the line, Li Qingshan would be alive and kicking again in a decade or so. That would be a great loss. This kid had far too many tricks up his sleeves. Though, since he wants to negotiate with me, he's still afraid of me blowing up my soul nascence at the end of the day. Even if he can escape alive, he'll either not have too much confidence, or he'll have to pay an extremely heavy price, or both. I refuse to believe you can trap me in your sea of consciousness for the rest of my life. Let's see who can outlast the other. You better calm down. Let's come up with a plan that satisfies both sides. Li Qingshan could not help but laugh aloud, but he was sweating inside, as even when his soul nascence was about to explode, he still had not grasped the opportunity accurately. All he could do was gamble. Chapter 8:23. The myriad poison ancestors' poison sure is potent. Is there anything I can do about it, Senior Tree King? Ru Xen crossed her arms and asked, pointing at her chin. They were in a tree hole beneath the great banyan tree. It was composed of huge, intertwined roots. It was extremely spacious, filled with the fragrance of resin. Yin Qing laid on a platform composed of roots. Her body had been reduced to a humanoid shape by the poison, and her aura was extremely feeble. A droplet of yellow-green venom dripped from her body, kicking up a puff of white smoke when it landed on the ground. As an Azura, her body and life force far surpassed regular cultivators or even demon commanders, but she did not possess a heaven-defying cultivation method like the 9 transformations of the demonic and divine or the path of white bone and great beauty after all. She still could not endure the myriad poison ancestors' poison. All I can do is maintain her life force, but the poison is still deeply rooted, spreading and strengthening by devouring her life force. Even the cleverest housewife can't cook a meal without rice. The unique secret technique of the myriad poison cult requires a corresponding antidote. It all depends on whether he can bring back the myriad poison ancestors' Sumeru ring. The Banyan Tree King's voice echoed through the tree hole. A dark green aerial root fell down, injecting sap into Yin Qing's blood. This guy is very petty. He'll stare back even if he's glared at him. Myriad poison has offended him, so what good fate awaits him? Ruexine smiled. Li Qingshan chatted with the myriad poison ancestor as he flew through the sea of trees. Compared to the nervousness and intensity he felt earlier, he was much more relaxed now. However, the myriad poison ancestor's existence was like a fishbone stuck in his throat. He had to get it out. When the sky darkened, Savage Mountain came into view. The huge hole blasted open in the clouds had already closed up and vanished. It was currently drizzling. Little and stood on the top of the tall tower on the main peak. Her black hair was like mist, about to merge with the rain. Only when she saw Li Qingshan's figure did her lips curl into a smile and fly over to receive him. Li Qingshan told Little and everything that had happened, but Little and was unable to come up with a good idea immediately. I better ask the Banyan Tree King for help. How's Yin Qing? Li Qingshan asked as he passed through the fog. Ru Xian's injuries are under control, and she's currently thinking of a way to detoxify the poison, Little and said. Ru Xian? I almost forgot that she's also a disciple of the School of Medicine. Let's go and take a look. Li Qingshan was very friendly to those who served and helped him. After passing through the 8-directional foggy sea formation, the valley was filled with rain and fog. The towering trees were soaked by the rain, and their color was especially deep. Even the mountains were dyed black. Seeing this familiar scenery, Li Qingshan couldn't help but relax, and a relieved smile appeared on his face. Although there was still a great threat that hadn't been eliminated, he had still won this battle. His ears twitched as if he had heard something. "I heard you bad-mouthing me from 10 miles away." Li Qingshan lifted the green vine curtain and walked in, glaring at him. "I'll tell you." Ruexian shrugged. "How is it?" the Banyan Tree King asked. A great cultivator's fate was extremely important. If the myriad poison ancestor had died, he would definitely sense it. Since he did not sense it, it meant the myriad poison ancestor had already fled, which made sense too. Third heavenly tribulation great cultivators were not that easy to kill after all. However, he had to consider this. If the myriad poison ancestor fled back to the myriad poison cult, then Li Qingshan's dual identities would definitely be exposed to the world. The reactions of the Hawkwolf Guard and the Chan Monastery of Devanaga would all be a small matter. If the Dragon King of the Sea pursued him everywhere, then that would be a huge problem. As a result, the Banyan Tree King had to consider how to mediate between them. "I've dealt with it," Li Qingshan said calmly. "You've dealt with it?" A hint of surprise appeared in the Banyan Tree King's voice. "Though there's still a small problem. That old bastard's soul nascence ran into my sea of consciousness and refused to leave, so I've temporarily suppressed it. I still need to ask for your guidance. Let's cure Yin Qing first." With a wave of his hand, Li Qingshan unleashed the water mirror's image again and retrieved the 2 Sumeru rings. However, it took quite a bit of effort to open them. In the end, he still had to ask the Banyan Tree King for assistance, and only then did he manage to open them. After a great battle, Li Qingshan was extremely exhausted, and he even had to split his attention to suppress the myriad poison ancestor's soul nascence. Through this small matter, he became even more aware of just how unpleasant it was for the myriad poison ancestor to remain in his sea of consciousness. Normally, it would be fine, but if he encountered another great battle and the old bastard messed around in his sea of consciousness, he would use up 50% of his strength at the very least. If he accidentally allowed the old bastard to grasp an opening, he might even face the danger of turning the tables. Cultivation went even more without a doubt. This bastard was truly an inner demon. It's no wonder that old bastard can keep stalling away calmly. His existence has blocked off my future prospects. There were many bottles and jars in the myriad poison ancestor's Sumeru ring. If he asked Li Qingshan to look for the antidote, he really would have no idea where to start. It was all thanks to the Banyan Tree King's great knowledge that he found a glass bottle. An aerial root sucked up some of the medicine and sprayed it on Yin Qing. The poison immediately diluted by a lot. Li Qingshan and Little and also ingested the antidote according to what the Banyan Tree King had taught them, completely eliminating the threat of the poison. The Banyan Tree King sprinkled some more tree sap, and Yin Qing's wounds healed rapidly. Before long, she slowly woke up, and her eyes that had been blinded by the poison regained their brightness. She murmured, "I'm still alive. This isn't the Azura realm." She had thought she would be reborn in the Azura realm. Through this battle, she had proven once again just how dangerous it was to provoke in existence an entire major realm of cultivation above her. "I haven't even allowed you to die yet." Li Qingshan laughed aloud. The Banyan Tree King said, "It's all thanks to the Azura realm that my life is no longer in danger. However, it's unavoidable that my strength will be affected, so I need to be mentally prepared." Yin Qing nodded slightly, expressing that she understood. This was not the Azura realm after all. Even if she was injured, she could recover slowly. "You've done a great service this time, so I'll reward you handsomely. I'm willing to repay you with my body. What do you think?" Li Qingshan patted Yin Qing's shoulder with a smile. A cool, moist breeze blew into the tree hole, and Yi Liusu lifted the curtain and entered. She glanced at Li Qingshan and pursed her lips. Ruexian chuckled, but she said nothing. Shaoan was emotionless and incorporeal. "Cough," Cough, I was just telling a joke to liven up the atmosphere. What's with your expressions? You don't have the slightest sense of humor. Even with how thick-skinned Li Qingshan was, he felt slightly embarrassed. Of course, it was only a tiny bit. He had gone as far as to rope in his subordinates for the sake of his great ambitions. Yin Qing burst out laughing. This king sure had a lot of romantic debts. She recovered soon afterwards. My king's valiance in battle has left me in great admiration, but the reward is far too great. I'm just a willow, so I'm not blessed enough. I really can't handle it. I think it's better if he rewards me instead. Li Qingshan acted like he did not hear Ru Xian's mocking laughter. He instructed her gently, return to the Azura field and recuperate for now. I'll find a way to help you recover your strength. After sending Yin Qing to the Azura field, he passed the myriad poison ancestors' Sumeru ring to Ru Xian. Take a look and see if there's anything you need. Ru Xian did not hold back, searching through it carefully. The myriad poison ancestors' Sumeru ring was extremely well stocked. It contained the cultivation methods and resources of the entire myriad poison cult, which would be extremely helpful to her plan. Chapter 824. As long as a cultivator survived 3 heavenly tribulations, even if they didn't cultivate the Tao of divination, they would still have a premonition of the heavenly secrets. Not to mention the fact that great cultivators would normally try to find ways to make up for this. Even if they could not devise ingenious strategies, at least they would not be able to devise ingenious strategies. They had sufficient energy and ability anyway. The myriad poison ancestor was no different. He could find a way to interfere with or even suppress the myriad poison ancestor's premonition. A large part of the reason why the myriad poison ancestor had suffered such a humiliating defeat was because Li Qingshan and Little and both possessed the ability to interfere with the heavenly secrets. Otherwise, how could Little and have succeeded with a sneak attack? Even if he was slightly stronger, he would still be overwhelmed by the myriad poison ancestor. His life might even be in danger. Among the various mysteries of the heavens, there was one that was the most difficult to interfere with, and that was the ability to sense one's own life and death. As the saying goes, life and death matters. Many mortals who have experienced a lot of danger would be able to sense it, let alone a great cultivator who had cultivated for 1,000 years and was aware of fate. The myriad poison ancestor's body had been destroyed, leaving behind only his soul nascence, so this premonition would only become sharper. In other words, no matter what method Li Qingshan came up with to kill him, he would have enough time to react and explode his nascent soul. Doesn't that mean there's no solution? Li Qingshan frowned slightly. He was a little annoyed. His Phoenix Nirvana might not even succeed. If he was not careful, he would really end up dying together with his opponent. There is still a solution. The Banyan Tree King wanted to say something but stopped. Please enlighten me, fellow Taoist. Li Qingshan cupped his hands. There's an old friend in the Southern Sea that's skilled in creating illusions. It's capable of causing one to fall into a state of confusion and make the fake become real. If he's willing to help, then this calamity can be easily resolved. Ru Xian was concentrating on reading a book of poison, and she raised her head in surprise when she heard this. Are you talking about the Mirage Sea King? That's right. It's the Clam King of Mirage Sea, the Banyan Tree King said. Clam King of Mirage Sea. Li Qingshan mumbled to himself. He had read about this name in a book before. Among the 72 demon kings, he was the most mysterious one. Because he had always lived in a place called the Mirage Sea in the South China Sea, and never left the sea border, it seemed that he had not done any major events that affected the 9 regions, so there were only a few records about him. With the Clam King of Mirage Sea's abilities, there's no one more suitable than this. I just need to lure this myriad poison into an illusion for a moment, and I'll have plenty of ways to deal with him. But will he help me? Are there any conditions? Li Qingshan was doubtful. While there were strong and weak demon kings among the 72 demon kings, as long as they had not ascended or died, and they had accumulated a few thousand years, they were basically at the level of the Dragon King of the Sea. Even 10 myriad poisons might not be able to defeat them, and 10 Li Qingshan naturally might not be able to defeat them either. It was best not to provoke the dragon and tiger just to deal with the wolf and the fox, and end up in a hopeless situation. There's no need for any conditions. He'll definitely help you. Go to the South China Sea and look for him. The banyan tree king changed his hesitant attitude just now and said with certainty, "So you trust this clam king of Mirage Sea so much?" Li Qingshan was slightly surprised. In the years he had known the banyan tree king, this old man had always left some leeway in his words. The world was unpredictable, and even with his intelligence, he could not predict everything. Only by leaving leeway could one be at ease, and it was very rare for him to be this resolute. He could not help but wonder, don't tell me the clam king of Mirage Sea is actually a female demon? There's something going on between the two of them? Heh, speaking of which, the South China Sea and the Mist Province are right next to each other, and the two of them never leave their territory either, so it does seem like they're watching over each other from afar. Don't let your thoughts run wild. I understand his personality very well. As long as you claim to be my subordinate, he definitely won't make things difficult for you based on our many years of friendship, said the banyan tree king. Ru Xian raised an eyebrow and glanced at Li Qingshan. She wanted to say something, but the banyan tree king's voice rang out in her head. I know you come from the South China Sea. Don't say anything else. How strange. He's even stopping me from saying anything. Though, the banyan tree king shouldn't harm him, so I'll just wait and see for now. Ru Xian thought. Coincidentally, little N's clear, deep eyes looked over. Ru Xian communicated, don't tell me you've also received a warning from the banyan tree king. Little N withdrew his gaze silently, basically tacitly agreeing to it. He fell into thought slightly. There were only a few descriptions of the clam king of Mirage Sea in the books that Li Qingshan had read. According to the banyan tree king, there was no danger at all. However, the situation that Ru Xian and Little N knew was the exact opposite. The legends regarding the Mirage Sea were a horror story that Ru Xian had heard since she was young. According to the information Xiaoan had read, there were countless cultivators who had lost their lives there. Unlike the Endless Trench and the Perpetual Daylight Sea, which were renowned for being dangerous in the South China Sea, the location of the Mirage Sea was not fixed. Instead, it drifted freely in the South China Sea, which made it even more unpredictable. Whether it was a mortal or a cultivator, a human or a mutant, once they entered, they would find it difficult to find a way back. There were also survivors who managed to escape, but everyone's description of the Mirage Sea was different. Some said that it was a demonic island where ghosts and monsters roamed freely, while others said that it was a treasure mountain filled with gold and silver. This only added to the mysterious aura of the Mirage Sea. Because most of those who managed to escape were mortals, and not a single cultivator who was countless times stronger was able to escape, the mainstream view of the South China Sea cultivation world was, the clam king of Mirage Sea intentionally vomits. She will release the clam gas and lure cultivators into a strange and dazzling illusion. Then she will devour their essence and refine their souls into the clam gas, increasing the power of the illusion. Mortals are too weak and are not valued. Instead, they have a chance to slip through the net. Thus, the Mirage Sea was recognized as the #1 forbidden ground in the South China Sea. It was even more dangerous than the Ink Sea in the Azure Province. Li Qingshan, who knew nothing about this, seemed to be walking towards the abyss with his eyes closed. It was too strange that the banyan tree king did not allow anyone to remind him of this. I'll have to rely on you again this time, fellow. Li Qingshan said in complete respect. After going through so much, he already trusted the banyan tree king very much. It's just a small matter, so there's no need to take it to heart. I'm already very surprised that you've managed to force the myriad poison ancestor to this extent. Then I'll return to my dwelling and recuperate first. Once I recover, I'll set off for the South China Sea in search of the clam king of Mirage Sea. Li Qingshan stood up and bid farewells. The banyan tree king said, you can stay here and recuperate. I'll lend you a hand. Then I'll be troubling you, fellow. You can tell me what kind of demon that fellow Shin is. I'll have a way to deal with her once I see her, Li Qingshan agreed happily. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. Under the Banyan Tree King's assistance, Li Qingshan had basically recovered from his wounds. His exhaustion was all gone. This was all thanks to him finding the antidote, or just purging the poison would have taken 10 times longer. The Banyan Tree King passed a wooden sea map to Li Qingshan and pointed with his roots. According to my calculations, the Mirage Sea stops here right now. Go there quickly. Don't waste any time along the way, or who knows where you'll end up drifting to again. Over the past few days, Li Qingshan had gained a rough understanding of the Clam King of Mirage Sea's personality from his conversations with the Banyan Tree King. He was filled with confidence about this trip. After thanking the Banyan Tree King again, he set off for the South China Sea with Little and in search of the Mirage Sea. The Banyan Tree King watched Li Qingshan vanish into the horizon. Ru Xian's voice rang out from beneath the tree. I never thought the Clam King of Mirage Sea would actually be a very kind person despite her vicious reputation. Who knows? The Banyan Tree King's voice was filled with emotion. Who knows? Isn't he an old friend of yours? Ru Xian asked curiously. The strangest old friend of mine, and while we're old friends, we're not exactly familiar with each other. The Banyan Tree King smiled. We're old friends, but we're not familiar with each other. Sure enough, it's very strange, Ru Xian said. The strangest part is that he still hasn't undergone the fourth heavenly tribulation. I originally thought he should have ascended 3,000 years ago. Not only are we not familiar with each other, we don't even know if he's a man or a woman, as no one has ever seen his true form. Sometimes he's extremely friendly, sometimes he's filled with hostility. Even when C toured the coast of the South China Sea, he made a great joke out of him. The Banyan Tree King thought back to the matters from several thousand years ago in a leisurely manner. CC? Ru Xian was taken aback. Only then did she remember who CC was. The founding emperor ruled over the 9 provinces and toured the world. He had once visited the Mist Province to visit the Banyan Tree King before descending south to the coast of the South China Sea. The subsequent emperors never did that again. Ru Xian had left the South China Sea when she was young, so she did not know much about the Clam King of Mirage Sea. Now that she heard about all of this, she could not help but sigh. In other words, this Clam King of Mirage Sea might not necessarily show respect to anyone. She's also so powerful that she doesn't have to show respect to anyone. You could say that, said the Banyan Tree King. Ru Xian smiled. Kid Li is in trouble this time. Why didn't you ask me why I didn't tell you to warn him? Asked the Banyan Tree King. You have your reasons, don't you? And, does he even need me to warn him? That kid seems crude, but he's actually very cunning. There aren't a lot of people he trusts. If the mighty Banyan Tree King wants to deal with someone in the Mist Province, why would he send him to the distant South China Sea? Isn't that a very reasonable consideration? Said Ru Xian. It's no wonder he trusts you so much, said the Banyan Tree King. I just happen to understand how it feels to be unable to say certain things clearly. However, probably not everyone is as reasonable as me. Ru Xian gazed at the horizon as a sliver of worry flashed through her eyes. Little and is the person he trusts the most. He might not be willing to betray this trust. Most importantly, he's the only person she trusts. Whether it's the Banyan Tree King or herself, no matter how trustworthy they seem, they're all the same in her eyes. That child really is as strange as you can be. The Banyan Tree King sighed. You didn't come looking for me just to tell me this, did you? I have a question about the path of medicine that I want to ask you about. This also has to do with the success of the battle against Fire Melt Mountain. Ru Xian immediately became respectful. Let's hear it. After listening to Ru Xian's question, the Banyan Tree King fell silent for a very long time. The strong prey on the weak. Although the strong prey on the weak is also the way of nature, your actions are far too unjust. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.